Hey guys, tonight we set sail into the gray, glistening unknown just as the skies are opening up. You can smell it before it hits that damp, salty, metallic tang that cuts through the brine like a knife. The wind shifts, gulls vanish from the sky, and your boots slip just slightly more than usual on the deck. Somewhere behind the clouds, the sun calls it quits. You, however, don't get that luxury. The sails are full one moment and lurching limp the next. A shadow crawls across the sea, dragging sheets of silver rain behind it. This is no tropical squall with drama and flair. This is the kind of steady, ceaseless drizzle that finds the holes in your coat, soaks your socks, and leaves you squinting through curtains of wet for hours. The sort of storm that drains color from the sky and your mood in equal measure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first raindrops hit like soft taps on a coffin lid, then harder, louder, steadier. You glance up and see the mainsail flap and groan, already slick and twitching in the wind. The lookout in the crow's nest curses, then covers his face with a torn scrap of waxed cloth. You're already soaked to the bone. Rain on a pirate ship isn't just inconvenient, it's a logistical nightmare. Your world is built of wood cloth, salt, and rope, all things that get real grumpy when wet. The powder stores are one misplaced drop away from becoming useless mud. Your navigation tools are made of brass and paper, meaning rust and ruin, if not quickly stashed. The sails are stitched by hand, and rain adds weight and stress they weren't meant to bear. So, your crew moves fast. Every hand is called. You scamper across the deck with coils of rope, lashing the guns tight to prevent them from sliding. Someone shouts to close the gun ports. No one wants seawater sloshing into the hull. The cook inexplicably is shouting about salted meat and storms being bad for morale, as if that's news to anyone. You're ordered to batten down the hatches, and yes, that's a real phrase. It's not just some Hollywood flourish. You drag thick tarpaulin across openings, secure it with iron hooks, and stomp your boots on the deck to test the seals. Someone next to you grumbles about last time when a storm like this flooded the hold and took half the powder. You don't ask questions. The sea itself is no longer the usual rolling blue. It turns into a wall of shifting lead, smashing against the hull with rhythmic groans. You feel each wave in your knees. Every new splash sneaks under your collar, but nobody panics. Not yet. This is routine chaos. Wet chaos, but expected. A small historical fact for your damp misery pirate ships were often smaller than naval vessels, not because pirates had no ambition, but because small ships were easier to maneuver and cheaper to maintain. But small also means vulnerable. Storms don't scale down just because your ship is cute. Meanwhile, a superstitious old sailor at the helm mumbles to himself, tracing something in the air with his fingers. You can't make it out through the foggy glass of your brain, but you catch a word undrowned. He says it like a blessing or a wish, or maybe a curse. And here's your first quirky tidbit during rainstorms. Some pirates, especially in the Caribbean, believed it was bad luck to kill rats. Why? Because rats always left a sinking ship, and if the rats were calm, the crew figured they would be fine. If the rats panicked, well, maybe it was time to start praying. You spot one such rat scurrying along a rope unbothered. That's either comforting or deeply ominous. You can't decide. Historians still argue whether pirates carried dedicated storm gear or just suffered through it. Some suggest they used waxed cloaks borrowed from merchant ships or fashioned rainwear from oiled canvas. Others say that since space and weight were so limited aboard a pirate ship, anything that wasn't absolutely vital to plunder or survival simply didn't make the cut. Dry clothes, luxury item. You try not to think about it as water drips from your nose. Down in the hold, a crewmate is shouting for help. A barrel's come loose. You and another sailor rush down the slick stairs and slip on what might be fish guts or just some sailor's last meal. It's all the same in the dark. You brace the barrel with your back and lash it in place while trying not to think about the fact that it's labeled gunpowder or that it smells like pickled turnips. When you emerge, the rain has thickened into a curtain, Visibility's dropped. The lookout has given up entirely and is now just ringing a bell every minute to keep time and signal he hasn't been washed overboard. You raise your eyes to the storm and wonder if Neptune takes requests. You're ordered to double-check the lifeboat lashings, as if a single lifeboat will help you when Poseidon decides it's your time. Still, you go. Pirates might be many things: drunk, smelly, aggressive, but careless. They are not. Not with their own lives. You pass the captain who's standing at the wheel, with one hand, hat-off hair, plastered to his skull, eyes fixed on the horizon. He doesn't flinch at the thunder, doesn't twitch at the lightning. But you swear his lips are moving. Maybe he's praying too. Maybe he's cursing the storm or the gods or his own luck. You can't hear him over the wind. The rain doesn't just fall, it inserts itself into your boots, into your beard, into every scratch and fold of the ship. It hammers the deck in rhythm, a steady, endless patter, like some malicious lullaby. You're sent below and then back above again in a cycle that feels designed to ruin your last pair of dry undergarments. Today's mission: protect everything that can rot, rust, or explode. First stop, the powder room. Tucked deep inside the belly of the ship, this is where the black powder lives, sealed in barrels wrapped in cloth and usually treated like royalty. Now it's treated like royalty caught in a flood. You help 2 crewmen stack sandbags around the hatch and double layer every seam with tallow and waxy canvas. The powder's worth more than any of you individually, and possibly all of you combined. You get a rag and mop your hands dryish, even as rain creeps down your sleeves again. You're learning that dry is more of a suggestion today. Above deck, the sails are being reefed. That's sailor speak for rolling them up, tying them down, and praying they don't tear. Wet canvas is deceptively heavy, twice the weight of dry, if not more, and flapping around like it's in a knife fight with the wind. You join the lines, hauling it in. It slaps you in the face once, and your crewmates laugh. That's fair. You laughed last time it happened to someone else. The mainmast groans ominously as a gust rattles through. The helmsman shouts over the wind, "Ease up, or we'll snap her like a matchstick." And suddenly the line's urgency shifts from standard panic to emergency panic. You grab the rope tighter, the muscles in your arms screaming. It smells like wet hemp and sweat and fear. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Pirate ships often had fewer sails than their Navy counterparts, in part because they preferred agility over brute force. Less sail meant quicker turns, but it also meant less surface area to catch wind, which in a storm was a blessing. You didn't want full canvas up unless your life insurance policy included being flung into the sea like a skipping stone. As you move toward the aft deck, the boatswain is shouting for oilskin wraps. Not everyone gets one, but you manage to snag a ragged bit. It smells like a dead seal and feels only marginally warmer than nothing. Still, it's something. You tie it around your shoulders and hope it stays put. Then the lanterns. Fire and rain don't get along, and what little light you had is starting to sputter. You're given a precious dry flint, and you duck into a makeshift lean-to and made from an upturned barrel and a strip of hide. It's barely big enough for you and the lamp. As you strike the flint, you think of how absurd this is lighting a flame, while the sea itself is throwing a tantrum. You get it lit. For a few seconds, you feel like a magician. There's an old superstition on board, one of many, that if the storm extinguishes all the ship's lanterns, the voyage is cursed until you make landfall again. No one says it outright, but you can tell from how quickly everyone guards their flames. Even the most skeptical among the crew go quiet when the last lamp flickers low. Now for the rigging. You're ordered to help check knots and tighten slack lines. You know what that means climbing. In the rain. Which is exactly as fun as it sounds. The ropes are slick as eels, and your fingers have gone beyond numb to a kind of existential damp ache. You climb like your half-squid eyes narrowed against the sting of salt rain. At the top, you glimpse something truly terrifying, a distant flash of lightning illuminating the entire ocean like an oil painting, and you realize just how small your ship is. Below you, the deck is a blur of figures, slipping, shouting, hauling. The ship creaks beneath your feet like an old man's back at a family reunion. Here's a bizarre but true tidbit. In some pirate crews, new recruits were expected to prove themselves by climbing the rigging during a storm. Supposedly, it was a kind of twisted initiation. If you fell, you weren't meant for pirate life. If you made it, welcome aboard. You hang there for a second, clinging to rope and pride, wondering how many others had the same view and the same thought. What in Neptune's beard am I doing here? Historians still argue whether pirates were more organized during storms than we give them credit for. Some journals describe chaos and panic. Others describe drills and routines almost as rigid as naval ships. The truth, like most things at sea, probably lies somewhere in between. A tight crew ran like clockwork when they had to. A ragtag gang of drunkards, less so. You descend slower this time, mindful of the wind. One misstep and you're kissing the deck if you're lucky. Back below deck, someone's singing. A low, off-key sea shanty about a mermaid and a barrel of gin. You don't recognize the tune, but you join in anyway. Anything to keep your brain from noticing how every fiber of your being is wrinkled wet and vibrating with cold. You help stow loose items, cutlasses, water barrels, even a pair of boots someone left behind. The boots squelch. You try not to gag. That smell, definitely not just seawater. You glance at the cargo. Some barrels have shifted, but nothing's cracked open yet. You tap one and it answers back with a slosh. Could be rum, could be vinegar, could be something worse. You move on. Then comes the last task of the shift, sealing the quarter gallery windows. These little portals to the outside world aren't just decorative. They're a constant source of leaks in storms. You wedge strips of fabric into the cracks, tighten shutters with strips of soaked leather, and mutter all the sailor prayers you know, just in case the sea decides it wants a peek inside. With every creak of the wood and every fresh gust, you feel the ship bending, not breaking, just flexing with the wind like it's rolling with a punch. You find yourself quietly rooting for it. Come on, girl, hold fast. Just a few more hours. Back on deck, a barrel of rainwater has been set out. Someone jokes it's tonight's stew base. No one laughs too hard. That might actually be tonight's stew. You're shivering now, but at least the worst of the panic has passed. The sails are tied, the cannon secured, and the hatches are mostly sealed. So what's next in a pirate storm survival kit rain gear, if you can call it that? You've ditched your shirt because wet cloth just makes things colder. In its place, someone hands you a thick, greasy rag that smells faintly like bacon and strongly like regret. It's supposedly treated with what no one knows. Maybe whale oil, maybe fish guts, maybe whatever they scraped off the inside of a lantern last week. Either way, you slap it across your shoulders and call it fashion. Another pirate walks by in an old waxed cloak, 3 sizes too big, dragging the edges like a wet mop. He looks like a ghost from a particularly sloppy opera. You'd laugh, but your teeth are too busy chattering. Historical fact of the day, pirates didn't have official uniforms, but their clothing was adapted for survival. Loose-fitting shirts, wide sashes to hold tools, and layers that could be added or stripped as needed. But in the rain, no matter what you wore, it eventually became a sponge. You glance around at the rest of the crew. One guy's wearing half a burlap sack like it's a shawl. Another has fashioned a sort of hood out of an upside-down bucket. A third has just given up and stands arms crossed, shirtless, and muttering curses at the sky in Spanish. El cielo es una broma mojada, he says. The sky is a wet joke. You nod. That tracks. Now here's your fringe tidbit. Some pirates rubbed their skin with animal fat or tar to help repel water. Effective, sort of. Hygienic, absolutely not. One infamous buccaneer supposedly swore by coating his arms in duck grease before every rain, claiming it made him invisible to the storm. It didn't, but he always smelled like roast poultry. Back near the helm, a small group is trying to dry their boots by the galley fire. They've removed the soles and are holding them up like soggy trophies, rotating them as if roasting marshmallows. A few paces away, the cook's shouting about stealing heat, which he apparently considers a personal insult. You find a dry patch under the awning, dry being relative. It's only damp here, and sit with your back against a barrel. For a moment, you try to wring out your sleeves. They twist like dishcloths. No luck. Then a thud from above. Everyone tenses. You half expect the mast to collapse, but instead it's just a bundle of laundry falling from the rigging. Laundry. Someone thought they could dry clothes in this. You blink slowly and wonder if you've finally gone sea mad. That's when the older quartermaster strolls past wearing what can only be described as a skirt made from sailcloth. He nods to you solemnly like it's the height of haute couture. You salute him with the soggy end of your sleeve. The thing about pirate rainwear is that it's less about staying dry and more about minimizing the soaking. Everything is wet, but if you can keep the inside layer just slightly less soaked than the outside one, you're winning. That's what the oilskins are for, not waterproofing, but slowing the invasion. You try to keep your hands covered. Salt water and cold wind make quick enemies of your skin, cracking it open like overcooked bread. One pirate nearby is rubbing candle wax into his knuckles, which is actually not the worst idea. Another is tying strips of cloth around his boots, hoping to squeeze the rain out. That's called optimism. Historians still argue whether pirates scavenged storm gear from the ships they plundered or simply improvised as they went. Some records mention Dutch cloaks and tarred aprons as loot. Others say most pirates preferred to ditch anything heavy or bulky. A fancy coat is only fun until it drags you overboard. A few enterprising souls have taken to cutting up old sails. One guy stitched himself a sort of poncho. It leaks at the shoulders, but he wears it proudly. Another wears a cracked leather glove on just one hand, claiming it's for grip. You're not sure what the other hand's supposed to do, moral support. You glance up again. The rain's let up a little more of a heavy mist now. Everything glistens coated in a thin sheen. The deck looks like wet glass. The ropes creak with relief as the wind eases just slightly. You hear a sigh ripple through the crew. For a few golden seconds, someone dares to light a pipe. The smoke curls upward, lazy and defiant. The man behind it leans against a post and smiles with the smugness of someone who's found the one dry match left on Earth. It's enough to make you consider bartering your next rum ration for a puff. Then a sudden gust and the pipe dies. He doesn't even curse, just shrugs and disappears below deck. Pirates, it turns out, are masters of micro-defeats. You head that way too. The wind is picking up again, and your fancy bacon rag cape has started to slide off one shoulder. Below the hold is a steamy mess of bodies, wet clothes, and arguments over hammock space. You find a crate, wipe it off with your sleeve, and sit. The lantern above sways, casting uneven shadows that flicker across the walls like dancing ghosts. Someone nearby is humming. Another's snoring. A third person is mumbling in their sleep about buried treasure and parrots named Harold. You look down at your boots. They're not just wet, they're now containers of water. You pour one out gently. It sloshes like soup. Somewhere the ship's cat meows. In this moment, you realize something comforting. No one here is dry. Not the captain, not the fiercest buccaneer, not even the parrot who is currently sulking under a hat. Rain doesn't discriminate. It reminds you that on this ship, in this floating world of shifting wood and salt and superstition, everyone's equal in soggy misery. Rain doesn't just fall on a ship, it gets into it. You might think a well-built vessel would be watertight. That's cute. In reality, rain finds every seam, every hairline crack in the deck, every knot that's just slightly too loose. And once it's in, it doesn't politely sit there. It spreads. You wake to a drip. 1, 2, 3, right between your shoulder blades. You shift on the crate, but it's no use. The leak is steady, and the crate's gone damp anyway. You check the walls of the hold, moist. The ceiling, glistening. The barrels, some are sweating like they've seen ghosts. Others are swelling at the seams. Wood, you're reminded, doesn't like water, or rather it likes water too much. It soaks it up, and when it does, it expands. That's fine in small doses, but too much, and you've got hull planks pushing against each other, groaning like old bones, or worse, separating entirely. That's when the sea comes in to say hello. Today's tasks stop the ship from turning into a very large, very tragic bathtub. You're handed a mallet and something called oakum, a fibrous mess of tarred hemp that feels a bit like someone shredded an old doormat, soaked it in molasses, and called it marine grade. Your job is to find any suspicious gaps between the deck boards and hammer that gooey stuff in. It's called caulking, and it's not glamorous. Here's your historical fact. Ships in the age of sail, pirate or otherwise, were constantly in need of caulking. Without it, the entire hull could slowly take on water until the only thing floating was the captain's hat. The ship pitches slightly as you kneel and begin packing oakum into a seam that looks a little too shiny for comfort. Each thump of the mallet is followed by the squish of water being displaced. You can hear it inside the boards, a soft glug-glug that makes your stomach clench. Nearby, someone's bailing water. Not seawater, Rainwater. It's collected in the bilge, the lowest part of the ship's belly, and now it sloshes around like the world's saddest soup. You hear the scrape of buckets, the grunt of effort, and the occasional splash as it's tossed overboard. Another pirate calls out, "Bilge rats are swimming again." It's a joke, but you know he's not wrong. You catch a glimpse of something furry and wet darting into the shadows. Whether it's a rat or someone's discarded wig is unclear. Here's your fringe. Fact of the day. Some pirates actually drank rainwater that pooled on deck better than seawater, and sometimes better than whatever else passed for drinking water on board. But when it mixed with bilge muck, yeah, no thanks. You trudge aft where the wood's softer, almost spongy underfoot. You press with your boot, yet definite give. You flag the carpenter, who shows up chewing a piece of bark and grumbling. He runs his hand along the floorboard and nods grimly. Swelling. We'll have to shave it down. Historians still argue whether pirate ships were maintained with the same care as Navy vessels. Some say pirates were too busy looting and running to worry about structural integrity. Others argue the opposite, that pirates had to keep their ships in shape or risk death in every storm. Based on the carpenter's constant rage, you lean toward the latter. Back on deck, a different problem is emerging. The rains loosen the bindings on the spare sail bundles, and one of them's threatening to roll right off into the sea. You grab two mates and wrestle it back, slipping twice and barking your shin against the railing. Someone throws rope. You secure it with a knot you hope is one of the good ones. You'll find out later. As the wind shifts again, the ship groans an eerie, drawn-out sound like the belly of a whale exhaling after a heavy meal. You pause, listening. Every pirate learns to listen to their ship, not just the commands, but the tones. That groan, that means strain. Somewhere something's flexing too much. You're ordered to check the starboard hull. Down you go again, this time deeper into the tight spaces between barrels and crates, ducking under hanging nets and swinging hammocks. The light here is a dim yellow haze from a dangling lantern, and the air smells like rope mold and an unwashed crewman's secrets. You find the problem: water has pooled near a patch of hull where the planks meet at an odd angle. It's leaking not fast but steady. You slap your hand against it and feel the cold ooze pressing back. Time for more oakum and tar, maybe a prayer. You get to work, fingers now permanently wrinkled and sticky. The hammering echoes around you like tiny thunderclaps. One pirate passes behind you and mutters, "Patch it well, or we sleep with the fish." You don't respond, mostly because your teeth are clenched and your mouth is full of rain-flavored cursing. Eventually, you climb back up, soaked filthy and somehow even colder than before. The sun, such as it is, begins to dim behind thick clouds, casting everything in that strange bluish gloom that makes time feel warped. Is it evening already? Or still morning? Hard to tell. The sky's been one big wet shrug for hours. You collapse beside a crate and exhale, watching steam rise from your clothes. Around you, the crew is quieter now. Tired. Not defeated, just waiting. Some sharpen knives, some play idly with cards. One guy is carving something into the rail, a name maybe, or a curse, or both. A cat possibly, the ship's possibly just a stowaway opportunist slips past your leg. It's bone dry. Of course it is. It disappears into a coil of rope like it's passing into another dimension. You envy it deeply. You glance at the deck again. A slow drip from above and the boards underneath flex just slightly with each step. You don't trust them. Not anymore. Not in this rain. The worst part, the rain's just started to pick up again. The rain has turned into a percussionist with a personal vendetta, beating its rhythm on the deck with manic precision. You can't remember the last time it stopped. Has it been hours? Days you suspect the clouds themselves have grown fond of the ship and are now treating it like a canvas, their brushstrokes made of cold water and bad moods. You're off duty for now, which means in theory you can rest. In practice, that means finding somewhere that's not already claim-soaked or threatening to collapse. Good luck. The hold is a mess of bodies, wet clothes, and makeshift hammocks strung at awkward angles. You're too slow to snag one of the good ones, so instead, you claim a spot near a half-empty rum barrel and a sleeping sailor who mutters things like left side cannons, and tell my parrot she's in charge now in his dreams. And that's when someone starts singing. It begins low, tentative, a humming more than a song. Then another joins in off-key but bold. Soon it's unmistakable a sea shanty, not one of the dramatic ones about revenge or sirens, but a dumb little tune about a fish with no name who refused to be caught. It doesn't matter. You hum along anyway. Here's a mainstream historical truth pirates sang. A lot. It wasn't just for entertainment. Shanties helped keep rhythm during work, boosted morale, and were one of the few forms of group expression allowed below deck. Rainy days were practically festivals of grumbling tunes and tragic ballads with verses that never seemed to end. Tonight, though, it's the rhythm that matters. The rain on the deck above the stomping of boots as someone tries to dry their legs, and the gentle thump of a rope hitting the mast. Somehow, it all becomes percussion. You join in tapping the barrel with 2 fingers. The sailor next to you whistles through his teeth. Someone further off tries to harmonize and fails spectacularly. It's perfect. Here's your quirky tidbit. Pirates sometimes invented songs on the spot tailored to whoever had recently done something dumb or funny. If you slipped on a fish, congratulations, you just became the chorus of tonight's hit single. If you fell overboard and lived, that's verse 2. These impromptu songs became part of the ship's oral history. One poor sailor on a French privateer was immortalized in a tune for accidentally mistaking the captain's toupee for a mop and shaking it out overboard. Tonight's shanty includes a bit about the cook's soup being half fish, half fingernail. He doesn't even protest anymore, just grunts and continues stirring the pot with what might be a broken dagger. Someone passes around watered-down rum just enough to warm your chest. Pirates didn't waste the good stuff on rainy days. Rainy days were for the sad rum. The we kept it near the bilge, and someone definitely dropped a sock in it, kind of rum. But you drink it anyway, because it's warm, it's liquid, and it reminds you you're not alone in this floating madness. Historians still argue whether pirates were actually more musically inclined than their naval counterparts. Some suggest the democratic nature of pirate crews fostered a more relaxed culture that allowed and even encouraged music. Others argue the songs were born purely out of boredom and necessity. Either way, you're grateful for them, even the terrible ones. The song fades, eventually replaced by the low murmur of conversation. You catch snippets plans for when the rain ends, stories about ports with taverns that served fish pie, and Smiles arguments over whether a storm like this is the ocean's way of punishing greedy men. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere above, thunder rolls deep, long, and theatrical. It doesn't scare you, not anymore. It's become just another part of the routine. You imagine the sea herself reclining in the clouds, idly tossing lightning bolts like pebbles into a pond, occasionally amused, mostly indifferent. Someone starts another song slower this time, a lullaby for grown men with calloused hands and no dry socks. It's a tune about a sailor who fell in love with a woman made of foam and never came back to shore. Probably metaphorical, probably. You sip more rum. It's terrible. You make a face. The sailor beside you chuckles and says, "You should try his stew." The cat appears again dry, as always curling up beside the cook's pot. You wonder if it knows a secret path through the ship's timbers, or if it made a pact with the storm gods in exchange for eternal dryness. Either way, it's purring. Loudly, it sounds smug. The cook ladles out something vaguely edible, soggy biscuits with a smear of fish paste and a chunk of boiled root vegetable. Not good, not bad. Just warm. You chew slowly, grateful to have something in your stomach. The rain starts again, louder this time. You look up. The planks groan above you as if the ship herself is sighing. Water drips from a knot in the ceiling, hitting the same spot on your boot over and over. A few pirates break out makeshift drums, upturned barrels' lids, and the occasional skull used as a hollow tapper. Don't ask whose. Probably not important. They start a beat, and soon hands clap in rhythm. Feet stomp. The smell of wet rope salt and wood smoke fills the hold. And just for a moment, the storm doesn't matter. The cold recedes. The misery becomes manageable. You are against all logic and nature having a good time. Until someone accidentally kicks over the rum barrel, everything stops. You can hear the panic. No, someone groans, diving to save a cup. Another tries to sponge it off the floor with his sleeve. You mourn the loss, silently placing a hand over your heart. Rest in peace. Low-grade, bilge-warmed rum. Laughter erupts, loud and ridiculous, because what else can you do? You look around, at the shivering men, the creaking ship, the smirking cat. And you realize something strange. There's joy here, not in spite of the storm, but maybe because of it. The kind of joy that comes only when everything's awful. And yet, you're still here, still afloat, still singing. Eventually, the rum-slick floor gets wiped up with someone's shirt. No one's sure whose, but it's now a mop, so ownership feels irrelevant. The laughter dwindles into sleepy sighs. Some pirates stretch out on crates, hammocks, and even just the bare boards. Others tuck themselves into corners with arms folded, trying to conserve heat, like pickled sardines with attitude. But for you, it's time to kill time. Rainy days at sea stretch forever. There's only so much singing and rum to go around, so you start looking for anything to do. That's when someone pulls out the dice. Not fancy carved dice with numbers etched in ivory. No, these are misshapen bone-colored cubes hacked crudely from whale teeth or bits of discarded wood. The pips are uneven stain from years of play and whatever else they rolled through. But they work, and soon there's a crowd. You wedge in beside two players and a man acting as the bank, though his vault is a pile of dirty coppers and fish bones. The game. Some pirate version of Hazard mixed with shouting and light threats. Everyone's got a different rulebook. You throw the dice and land a 7. That's either very good or extremely bad. Everyone argues for a minute before they decide it means you win a boiled sweet from the pot. Here's your historical fact. Pirates loved games of chance. Dice cards, coin flips, anything that involved risk was beloved among men who risked their lives daily. Gambling served as both a distraction and a way to redistribute wealth among the crew without mutiny, at least most of the time. You move to another group fiddling with wooden tiles. It's a game like checkers, but the pieces are bottle corks and pistol balls. One guy's trying to teach another how to play chess using chicken bones for pawns and a bit of dried sea biscuit as the queen. Powerful piece, he says, nodding solemnly. Crumbles under pressure. You smirk. Here's your quirky tidbit. There's some evidence pirates played a version of backgammon using turtle shells. Yes, actual shells. They'd scratch game boards into the underside and use pebbles or musket balls as pieces. Portable, sturdy, and vaguely grotesque, just how they liked it. As you sit and watch a particularly heated match between two crewmen, one of whom is clearly cheating and the other clearly knows but doesn't care, you notice how calm things are. The storm still rages above. The lantern still swings like a pendulum with something to prove. But down here, it's almost peaceful. Historians still argue whether pirates organized their downtime or if it all evolved organically out of boredom and rain-soaked delirium. Some believe certain captains enforced routines to keep men sharp. Others think the games were spontaneous little rituals formed over months at sea. What's undeniable is this pirates needed distractions, or they'd turn on each other faster than a parrot on a cracker. One game draws your attention. 3 coins, 2 hands, 1 secret. It's a bluffing game, and the stakes are serious. Winner gets first pick at dinner. You watch fascinated as a scruffy sailor with one eyebrow bluff laughs his way through 2 rounds and then suddenly loses it all to a kid who's probably faked his age just to be on board. You join in the next round, hoping your face doesn't give you away. You hold your coins tightly. The sailor across from you grins, revealing a row of teeth that look like they've seen better centuries. You bluff. You win. He shrugs, mutters something about beginner's luck, and tosses you a token that smells faintly like fish. That gets you an extra potato. Maybe. You pocket it like it's gold. Elsewhere, 2 pirates are balancing spoons on their noses. One has actually carved his into a hook shape to gain an advantage. The other protests. The matter goes to an impromptu council, which includes the ship's cook, the cat, and a man pretending to be the ghost of Blackbeard. No decisions are made, but the game continues anyway. Someone tries to juggle apples, fails, blames the rain. Apples are bruised, but not beyond soup potential. And then there are the quiet ones, pirates who don't gamble or sing or shout. They sit in corners carving tiny ships from driftwood, tying complicated knots for the sake of it, or simply staring into the flickering lantern lost in thought. You respect that. Rain makes philosophers of us all. Suddenly, a cheer erupts. One of the card players has won big a pile of buttons, a comb with 3 teeth, and a fishhook bent into a heart. He wears them proudly, threading them onto a string around his neck. Treasure, he says. Pure treasure. The others groan, but secretly admire it. You realize something: these games, these silly contests and tiny triumphs, they matter. They fill the endless void that bad weather leaves behind. They give the crew purpose, pride, and just enough laughter to keep madness at bay. And maybe that's what pirates did best. Not just plunder or pillage, but adapt. Take boredom and make it a game. Take misery and turn it into song. Take rain and all its dreariness and turn it into something else entirely. Something bearable, even fun. As the dice clatter again, and someone bets their lucky feather against a crusty pair of socks, you lean back and let it all wash over you. The storm can rage all it wants. Down here, the only thing pouring is laughter and maybe a little fishy rum if you're lucky. The hours bleed together like ink on wet parchment. Rain has a way of grinding time into one endless soggy blur. You've lost track of the sun entirely. Not that it was doing much to begin with. The games fade. The songs quiet down, and what's left is the unmistakable tension of too many people crammed in too small a space for too long. You've been shoulder to shoulder with the same dozen men for what feels like days, all of you dripping hungry and sleep-deprived. At first it was funny, then tolerable. Now every cough feels like a challenge. Every accidental elbow in the ribs is suddenly a personal betrayal. There's a reason sailors called it cabin fever, and on a pirate ship, it spreads faster than mold on bread. The first sign: silence. A creeping, uneasy kind of hush. Pirates aren't quiet by nature, so when the chatter dies and the dice stop rolling, you feel it in your gut. People are starting to notice each other in the wrong way. A burly sailor stands to stretch bumps another's mug with his boot, and suddenly, it's a stare down. Nothing gets said, but the air thickens. You hear a blade almost leave its sheath before someone mutters, "Not worth it." Still, it's enough to kill the mood. Here's your historical fact. Pirate ships were surprisingly democratic, but that didn't mean conflict-free. Crews often drafted charters with rules about fighting on board. Most prohibited duels during a voyage unless authorized by a vote. You couldn't risk bloodshed when everyone had to rely on each other to survive the next storm or the next cannonball. But rules and tempers don't always get along, especially on a ship where privacy doesn't exist and the only escape is jumping into a thunderstorm. You notice the more experienced pirates spacing themselves out, forming invisible buffer zones, retreating to opposite corners like cats circling a shared bowl. You decide to take a walk. Walk being generous, more like a slow shuffle between hammocks and crates. You nod to a few crewmates. Most just grunt in return. One is busy angrily brushing barnacles off his coat with a rat's tail. You don't ask questions. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some pirate captains enforced quiet time on long voyages, an actual mandated hour of no talking, partly to prevent fights and partly to preserve what little sanity was left. One infamous Caribbean pirate reportedly used a system of colored candles to signal talking permitted versus keep your mouth shut. Blue candle, no noise, no eye contact, just stew and silence. Back in your corner, you find that someone has stolen your spot. Not maliciously, just someone new slumped in your former seat using your soggy cloak as a pillow. You let it go. Not worth it. You've upgraded to a better seat anyway, a barrel that only slightly leaks. From your perch, you observe. It's like watching wolves confined in a kennel. No one's quite angry, just ready. Ready to argue, to snap to shove over a card game or a missing sock. One guy keeps accusing another of borrowing his knife. The second guy swears he didn't, but now he's holding a similar knife, and it's all getting very philosophical about knife ownership. You intervene. Offer your own knife as a temporary substitute. Peace is restored for now. The knife disappears into someone's boot, and you make a mental note to never lose track of your stuff. Historians still argue whether pirate crews truly operated by egalitarian principles or if the democratic image was more myth than reality. Some ships ran like floating republics. Others were dictatorships hiding behind charm and charisma. One thing is clear: rain and boredom reveal cracks in any system. The cat returned still dry, still smug. This time it's carrying a half-eaten biscuit and drops it like a peace offering in front of two men glaring at each other. One takes it, eats it. Conflict averted. You wonder if the cat's secretly in charge. Eventually, a shout from the upper deck, winds changing. Not enough to end the rain, but enough to stir the ship and give the crew something new to complain about. Movement always helps. You stretch your legs and volunteer for a topside shift, anything to breathe air that hasn't already passed through 5 different sets of lungs. The moment you climb the slick steps and emerge into the open, you feel it, the fresh bite of cold rain on your skin, the sting of wind, the rush of sound. It's unpleasant, but it's different, and that alone feels like salvation. You scan the deck, water pools between the boards reflecting the stormy sky like a cracked mirror. The sails hang limp-soaked and heavy, but the ropes twitch slightly in a new direction. You grab a line and help test the tension. The wind's uncertain, flickering like a candle. But it's there. One of the younger pirates slips on the slick deck and curses in 3 languages. You help him up. He nods, then promptly slips again. You leave him to learn at his own pace. Back below, things are noticeably calmer. That small shift in the weather has sparked a chain reaction, people moving, adjusting, doing. Purpose is the antidote to madness. A few pirates start rearranging crates. Someone hangs their shirt from a beam in the desperate hope it'll dry. The cook announces soup's ready, which is generous since what he's holding is just warm water with a single floating bean. But no one complains. Soup means a break, and a break means fewer fights. You sip yours slowly, letting it warm your tongue, your throat, your chest. It tastes like hope, or at least like bean. And then quietly from a corner hammock, someone starts humming again. Just like that, the tension eases. The storm still batters the ship from the outside, but within its creaking ribs peace, fragile, soggy peace settles for a moment. Later that night, though, honestly, night feels more like a formality. Under this blanket of endless gray, you find yourself curled near the galley, listening to a voice older than the sea itself. It's Hal, the bosun's mate, whose beard has more knots than the rigging, and whose breath smells faintly of pickled onions and ancient rum. He's telling a story. It starts like all pirate stories do, with a ship lost to time, a crew cursed by greed, and a sky not unlike the one currently dumping a waterfall onto your heads. She was called the Morning Lily Hal Rasps, and she never made it to port. You shift on your crate, drawn in despite the cold. Around you, others lean in, some cross-legged on the floor, some hanging from hammocks like damp bats, others crouched low with steaming mugs and tired eyes. Here's your historical fact. Pirates, like all sailors, relied heavily on oral storytelling. Many were illiterate, but stories passed between cruise ports and generations like valuable cargo. Tall tales blurred with real accounts, and the result was a kind of folklore that lived and breathed with the sea. Tonight, Hal spins his yarn about a ghost ship crewed by the dead men who had defied their captain and were sentenced to wander until the stars forgot their names. The ship was seen only during storms, he says, with sails torn to ribbons and lanterns that burned blue instead of gold. If you see her, Hal whispers you toss a silver coin into the waves, or she'll follow you to the deep. Someone chuckles. Coin, what if all I've got is a button? Then you better start swimming, Hal snaps deadpan. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirate crews really did carry storm offerings, small trinkets, or coins meant to be tossed overboard to appease the sea. Whether it was fear of Poseidon Davy Jones, or just a way to feel in control, tossing something into the waves felt better than doing nothing at all. The story continues. Hal claims he saw the Morning Lily once off the coast of Hispaniola, swears the sea went calm as glass just before she appeared. Ain't no lightning, ain't no wind. Just her. And that blue flame. His voice lowers until it's barely audible. And the sound of chains. Someone swallows audibly. Another pretends to scoff but doesn't make eye contact. You notice the cook leaning against the doorway, wiping his hands on his apron, listening intently despite himself. Even the cat seems intrigued, curled with its paws tucked and eyes half closed but alert. Historians still argue whether pirate ghost stories were based on real sightings or simply the fevered dreams of men driven mad by isolation, salt, and storm. A few logs even record sightings of strange lights at Sea Will-o'-the-Wisps, perhaps, or reflections from phosphorescent algae, but none as dramatic as Hal's ghostly galleon. As the story winds down, Hal finishes with the classic flair, so if the rain won't stop and the lanterns flicker and the cat leaves the hold without warning, he taps the floor with one knotted finger. You listen. Real close. Might be chains. Might be her. Silence follows. Not fear exactly. Just a deep stillness. the kind that comes when the storm outside matches the one rattling around in your imagination. Then, as if on cue, the wind howls through the cracks in the hull, and a rope up top clatters against the mast. A few pirates jump. One pretends to cough to cover it. You try not to smirk. To cut the tension, someone pipes up. Tell us about the mermaid who bit off Black Tom's ear. Groans. Not again. But Hal grins. Only if someone fetches me another drink. You oblige not out of generosity, but curiosity. Ghost ships are one thing, mermaids with attitude are another. The stories roll on. Some are clearly made up, like the one about a parrot that predicted storms with dead-on accuracy, or the tale of a cursed doubloon that turned whoever held it into a crab. But then there are others told in lower voices with less drama accounts of friends lost overboard, of ships vanished without explanation, of silent ports where every building stood, but every person was gone. Those ones linger. You sip your watery tea and try to shake the chill from your shoulders, not just from the rain, but from the imagery, now swimming through your thoughts. Ghost ships, glowing lanterns, drowned faces peering through the porthole. You glance toward the nearest hatch. It's closed. Good. You don't want to test Hal's coin theory tonight. The wind shifts again, and a particularly loud creak echoes through the hold. The mast. The beams. You don't care. You press your back to the wall and pull your coat tighter. Someone starts humming softly this time, a low tune without words. A lullaby in a key you don't quite recognize. It's the musical version of keeping a candle lit against the dark. You close your eyes, and for a second, just a second, you think you hear chains. Probably the wind. You wake, or maybe you never truly slept to the sound of needle and thread. A quiet but unmistakable rhythm, stitch, pull, sigh. Stitch, pull, mutter. Someone is mending sails by lantern light. You roll off your crate with a groan. Everything creaks your knees, your boots, your spine. The kind of full-body stiffness only damp wood and half-sleep can bestow. The air is thick with that familiar blend of salt sweat and mildew, and the rain's still falling above like it's trying to make the ocean jealous. Following the sound, you find two pirates hunched over a massive swath of soaked sailcloth. One's threading a sailmaker's needle the size of a dagger, while the other feeds the canvas slowly forward, careful not to let it drag through a puddle. Their faces are focused, lit in flickers by the swaying lantern. The needle gleams every few seconds, stabbing into the fabric like it holds a grudge. You kneel beside them, need a hand. Only if yours ain't made of fish, one says, squinting through the gloom. You take that as a yes. Here's your historical fact. Pirates often handled their own repairs, rigging sails, ropes, everything. A storm-damaged ship wasn't just inconvenient, it could be a death sentence. So every sailor pirate or not learned basic stitching, knot tying, and sail patching, especially on rainy days when the outside world was a wash of gray, and the only thing to do was prepare. You grip the edge of the canvas and hold it taut while the others stitch. The thread is thick coated in wax, and it smells faintly of tar and old honey. The needle punches through the cloth, dragging the thread with a satisfying little rip each time. It's oddly meditative. Stitch, pull, sigh. Around you, other pirates are doing similar work, patching rope with twine, hammering out dents in buckles, scrubbing mold from boots. One is boiling something in a pot over a low flame. Glue, he says when you ask. Sort of. You decide not to press further. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some pirates used fish guts, yes, actual intestines, as makeshift thread or lashing. Gross, absolutely, but surprisingly effective when dried and twisted. You've heard rumors of a man who stitched his own boot with shark sinew after losing a bet. Probably a lie. Hopefully a lie. Over at another barrel, a sailor is fashioning new netting for the cargo. His hands move automatically, tying knot after knot faster than you can track. He's humming a tune, something low and strange, not quite in tune with anything, but persistent, like the rain. Historians still argue whether pirates had dedicated sailmakers aboard, or if it was always a shared duty. Evidence leans both ways. Larger ships might have had specialists, while smaller ones may do with whoever had the steadiest hand and the least aversion to stabbing themselves with needles. Either way, mending sails wasn't glamorous, but it was sacred. You look at the fabric in your hands, once crisp and white, now worn thin, frayed along the edges, stained with what might be blood soot or an aggressively dropped stew. It carries the history of dozens of voyages, battles, escapes, and storms. You almost feel bad for it. Almost. The man next to you finishes a stitch, examines it, and grunts approvingly. Good enough for windwork, he says. Won't win any medals, but it'll hold. You don't ask who's handing out medals to pirates. Someone else is trying to mend a coil of rope. It's frayed in the middle, splintered like an unraveling braid. He cuts out the worst section, then begins the process of splicing the ends together, unwinding, reweaving, tightening, until the rope looks whole again. You remember learning how to do that your first week aboard. You also remember getting laughed at for doing it backward and creating what was effectively a decorative noose. You stretch your back and glance at the pile of tools nearby, needles, palm, thimbles, beeswax lengths of spare cloth. Some are in surprisingly good condition. Others look like they were salvaged from a shipwreck and have stories they're not willing to tell. Over by the door, one pirate is sewing a tear in his trousers, with fishbone no less. Don't judge, he says defensively. It's sharper than your wit. You raise your hands in surrender. The rain continues above, but the sound has shifted. Less frantic now, more like a steady drumming, a backdrop instead of a threat. You've grown used to it. The ship creaks with each swell, but it holds. She's old-patched and battered, but seaworthy, and you're part of what keeps her that way. You think about how odd it is, this violent cutthroat life of plunder and cannon smoke somehow balanced with hours of quiet stitching and mending. Pirates aren't just thieves, they're caretakers of their own survival. Seamstresses with sabers, tailors with tempers. Someone throws you a hunk of sailcloth. Patch this one too. It's got a hole big enough to fit your ego. You grin and thread your needle. Your fingers ache. Your knuckles are raw. But for once it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like maintenance. Of the ship, yes, but maybe also of yourself. Of the rhythm, the ritual, the tiny, tedious things that hold everything together. You finish your patch, not perfect but strong. The others nod. Outside, the rain eases to a mist. Inside, the sails are stitched, the ropes retied, and for now, so are the crew. Later in the day, though time's mostly a theory, now you follow your nose to the food stores. Not because it smells good necessarily. More like it smells different, and at this point, that's enough to get your curiosity moving. You duck through the low hatch into the supply hold, where the air is humid, rank, and vaguely fruity in the worst way. Barrels line the walls, stacked and strapped with ropes, lids sealed with wax or tar. Some are marked with crude symbols, a fish, a bone, a loaf. Others are labeled in a kind of ship shorthand you stop trying to decode after opening one marked J and finding it full of onions swimming in brine. You're not alone. A handful of crewmen are already down here prodding barrels, sniffing suspicious jars, and arguing over the state of the biscuit barrel. Green's normal right one asks, holding up a ship's biscuit roughly the size and density of a brick, flecked with something that may or may not be mold. Adds flavor, another shrugs. You wince. Here's your historical fact. Ship's biscuits, also called hardtack, were a staple aboard pirate ships. They were baked hard enough to survive years at sea. Unfortunately, they often became breeding grounds for weevils, mold, and despair. Rain didn't help. Damp biscuits turned soft. Soft biscuits turned foul. You reach into the barrel and pull one out. It has the texture of old wood and smells like your childhood fear of closets. You put it back. Elsewhere, a barrel of salt pork has sprung a leak. The brine's dripping onto the floor in slow, mournful globs like the meat itself is crying. You volunteer to help patch it, mostly because it's something to do, and also because the cook is eyeing you like he might throw the pork into the next stew leak, mold and all. You grab some wax from a candle stub and a strip of canvas, pressing them into the crack while muttering sailor curses under your breath. The wax helps. For now. Here's your fringe tidbit. In extreme cases, some pirate crews resorted to fermenting spoiled food into improvised alcohol or sauce, anything to kill the taste. One French privateer crew reportedly made rum cheese from curdled milk and soaked it in grog until it no longer moved on its own. Back at the biscuit barrel, the debate continues. One pirate insists the green spots are sea herbs and beneficial to digestion. Another claims his biscuit bit him. A third just eats one in silence, staring dead-eyed into the middle distance like a man with nothing left to lose. You check the water casks. Rainwater collected from tarps on deck is theoretically fresh, but if the barrels aren't sealed right, it turns quickly. One you inspect has a faint film across the surface and smells faintly like wet leather and hope gone sour. You make a mental note to stick to rum, or tea, or maybe rain dripping off the rigging. Someone shouts from a corner. They've opened a barrel of dried fruit figs or prunes or something equally wrinkled and questionably sticky. It's a rare treat, and you scramble over with the others to grab a handful. The flavor's sweet, a little sour, and suspiciously gritty. You eat two anyway. Vitamin C is worth the risk. Historians still argue whether pirates had consistently better or worse diets than Navy sailors. On one hand, pirates could plunder fresh supplies from ships and ports. On the other, they often went longer between resupplies, relying on whatever was already on board. The consensus, it depended on luck, the weather, and how generous the cook felt. Speaking of which, he arrives, now a ladle in one hand, a scowl in the other. Soup's on, he announces, voice like gravel soaked in vinegar. Today's feature, fish stew with surprise. What's the surprise, someone asks? You'll find out. You follow the line to the galley bowl in hand. The stew smells better than usual, fishy sure, but also spicy, like someone raided the pepper barrel without permission. You get your scoop and retreat to your seat, blowing on the surface before risking a sip. It's hot, salty, not bad. Then you bite something rubbery. The surprise. You decide not to ask. The crew eats mostly in silence, rain tapping above like a drum roll for the world's most pressing banquet. A few murmur jokes about fancy portside meals, roasted chicken, fresh breadfruit. You don't have to soak in rum first. It's fantasy, of course, but it helps. One pirate holds up a spoonful of stew like he's toasting. To the biscuit barrel, may it rest in peace. Laughter, real this time. The cat appears again, tail high, sniffing around bowls and occasionally batting at a beetle on the floor. No one stops it. If anything, they're grateful. Beetles in the galley are part of life. Beetles in your soup, slightly less ideal. You finish your meal and help scrape the pots. Every pirate pulls their weight, and rain days are no excuse to slack. You wash your bowl with seawater, scrubbed with a rag that may once have been a sock, and set it to dry on a tilted board. Back in the food, hold someone's trying to pickle something. No one asks what it is. It's best not to know until you have to chew it. You glance once more at the biscuit barrel. A few remain soggy and sad. You think about taking one for later just in case. Then again, chewing through one of those during a storm might qualify as a new form of torture. So instead, you settle for a prune and a mouthful of cloudy rainwater, because sometimes that's just the pirate life soup with mystery biscuits with attitude and prunes that taste like irony. You know it's been raining too long when even the captain starts scowling more than usual. He's usually a composed figure, all square shoulders and dramatic poses, the type who speaks in speeches and stands just right when lightning flashes behind him. But now he's pacing, muttering, squinting out the windows like he's trying to convince the storm to move on through sheer willpower. He calls a meeting on the quarterdeck, an unusual move in this weather, but no one dares refuse. You slosh your way, topside boots squelching on the slick wood. The crew gathers in a loose semicircle, dripping and shivering, eyes narrowed against the spray. The captain stands beneath a small awning cloak, plastered to his back, hat pulled low. His beard is wet. That alone is enough to make you nervous. "We've been idle too long," he growls. "This weather's testing us." That's pirate speak, for I'm afraid you lot are getting mutinous ideas. You exchange glances with your crewmates. He's not wrong. Here's your historical fact. Pirate captains weren't absolute monarchs. Their power came from the crew who voted them in and out. A captain could be replaced for cowardice, greed, or just general unpleasantness. Rainy days made things worse. Boredom plus close quarters equals tension. Tension plus poor leadership. That's mutiny stew. The captain continues, voice like thunder but slightly wetter. "We ride this out. No fighting, no gambling debts settled with knives. Anyone caught whispering about new captains can walk the plank, assuming we find one dry enough to walk." He gets a laugh, a small one, nervous. He nods. "Good, carry on." You return below, but the unease lingers like the damp. People start eyeing each other differently. Not openly hostile, but curious. Assessing. Who's got influence? Who's got friends? Who's got ambition? Here's a fringe tidbit. Some pirate captains intentionally held bad weather drills not for safety, but to occupy restless minds. A few even encouraged small contests, rope tying races, pistol loading competitions, anything to focus the crew's energy away from plotting and toward sweating. Your captain doesn't seem the fun and games type. More brooding and dramatic monologues. That's fine until his brooding makes everyone else twitchy. Later that evening, you catch a whispered conversation between two deckhands. Nothing treasonous yet, but the tone is wrong. Too soft, too intense. You hear phrases like "next port," and "when this clears," and one very deliberate, "he's been wrong before." You back away, not wanting to be part of whatever seeds are being sown. Historians still argue whether mutinies were common or rare aboard pirate ships. Some claim they were frequent, but often stopped early. Others say the very structure of pirate democracy prevented most from happening at all. But during long storms, when minds wander and morale sinks, even a well-liked captain can start looking like a liability. That night, a small fight breaks out over a blanket. Just a blanket. One pirate claims it was his. The other insists he found it fair and square. Voices rise. A crowd gathers. Someone draws a knife, not to use it, just to make a point. The captain doesn't intervene. The quartermaster does. He steps between them, growls something about better things to bleed for, and forcibly wraps the blanket around himself. Dispute settled, but the tension still there. Like a wet rope slowly fraying, you head topside to clear your head. The rain's softer now, more like drizzle, and the sky has hints of something lighter behind the clouds. But the air feels electric, charged. The watchman is slumped by the helm, humming to himself. You nod. He nods back. Neither of you speaks. No need. You lean against the railing, staring into the fog. Somewhere far off, there's lightning. Distant thunder. Maybe it's moving away, maybe not. You don't get your hopes up. Below deck, the lanterns flicker, as if they too are tired of the waiting. The captain emerges briefly to pace the deck alone. His boots click against the wood. His hands are behind his back. He stops to stare at the horizon, then vanishes again into his quarters. You wonder what he's thinking. Is he worried about the storm, the crew, his own leadership, or maybe all three? Back in the hold, the mood is subdued. Pirates sit in quiet groups, sharing stories with low voices and wide eyes. A few carve notches into the beams, counting days maybe something else. One writes in a journal. You catch a glimpse of the page. If it rains one more day, I'll sew my own boots to my feet and walk to port across the water. You relate to the sentiment. You try to sleep, but it's restless. Half dreams of mutiny and storm clouds shaped like skulls. You wake to someone talking in their sleep. He can't steer us out. He doesn't see the wind. The captain's name isn't spoken, but it doesn't need to be. The ship creaks louder than usual tonight. Maybe it's the wind, or maybe it's the sound of a crew thinking. You wake to the sound of whispering soft, urgent, too early. The kind of whispering that doesn't mean gossip or games. It means superstition. When you sit up, you see a circle of crew gathered near the center of the hold. They're huddled around something low voices and flickering lantern light, casting long shadows across the walls. You inch closer, curiosity dragging your aching limbs like a net full of bricks. At the heart of the circle, someone's tied a red string around a coin and is swinging it in slow circles over a map. The coin ticks left, ticks right, then makes a lazy spin. You blink. Someone's trying to divine the weather. Because of course they are. Here's your historical fact. Pirates, like most sailors of the age, were deeply superstitious. The sea was unpredictable, violent, and unconcerned with your opinions. In the absence of control, people invented their own rules. No whistling on deck might summon the wind. No bananas on board, bad luck. Women depends goddesses in calm waters, omens in storms. Go figure. Today's superstition seems to involve coins, maps, and questions no coin should be answering. Will it clear by morning? Someone asks aloud. The coin drifts counterclockwise. Someone swears under their breath. You suppress a laugh, but barely, because truth be told, you want to believe. After days of rain, a little magic doesn't sound so bad. One of the older pirates, Mal, steps forward. All right, he says, brushing his hands together like he's erasing the tension. Who's got the lucky charm? Out come the trinkets. A carved piece of driftwood, a shark tooth on a string, a rusty key, a bit of glass that once passed for an emerald. Each pirate clutches theirs like a talisman, some with reverence, others with embarrassment. You pull yours from a hidden pocket, a smooth stone from your childhood shore, worn nearly white, useless to anyone but you. You rub it between your fingers. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some pirates had individual storm charms they carried or even sewed into their clothes. One British pirate was said to have a crab's claw stitched into his hat lining. Another swore by a dried frog leg tied to his belt. Was it weird? Absolutely. But they believed in it the way modern sailors believe in weather reports cautiously, and with the hope they'd be wrong only when it didn't matter. The coin spins again. This time it clinks and lands flat. Everyone looks at each other. No one knows what it means. The silence grows thick. Suddenly someone sneezes. It breaks the spell. The tension collapses into laughter, not out of humor, but out of necessity. You realize how close everyone had come to believing the coin really knew something. It's the rain. It's always the rain. Makes you soft in the head. You head above deck just in time to see a sailor spit over his left shoulder and mutter something about cleansing the air. You've seen him do it every morning. Today, he does it 3 times. The sky is no help, just a flat gray shroud that stretches in every direction like a giant wet bedsheet. You can't even tell where the sun is. The ship's cat is curled on a coil of rope, licking its paw with infuriating serenity. You swear it hasn't been wet once. One pirate begins sketching shapes in the water, pooling on the deck sigils maybe, or doodles. Hard to say. Another hums a tune that doesn't have words, swaying slightly with the rhythm of the waves. A third is tying knots over and over in a pattern that resembles something. A net, a trap, a prayer. Historians still argue whether pirate superstitions were widespread or localized, whether some ships ran purely by logic and others by lore. But the written logs and oral traditions are littered with signs, omens, and little rituals meant to ward off bad luck. And few things bring out superstition like a storm that will not end. By midday, a new symbol appears on the mast. Someone's carved a crude eye with a dagger. It stares out over the bow like a warding sigil. No one claims it. No one scrapes it off. Later, the quartermaster performs his version of weather appeasement, which involves placing a silver coin under the ship's bell and knocking it 3 times with a piece of coral. Just in case, he says. Just in case of what no one asks. You see the captain pass through, once eyes scanning the crew, like he's measuring the depth of belief and wondering whether to scold or embrace it. He doesn't say anything, just adjusts his coat and moves on. Below deck, someone's playing a game with bones. Real ones, probably chicken. They roll them onto a board and read the way they fall. You watch half fascinated. The bones clatter and the reader frowns. "Storm's staying," he says. "Of course it is." Back near the food stores, someone has drawn symbols on the barrels with charcoal protective runes, probably. Another pirate says they're just vulgar drawings with extra swirls. You decide to interpret them as blessings. Couldn't hurt. The rain picks up again in the evening, because of course it does, and you find yourself below deck again drying your boots with the heat of a lantern and whispering to your lucky stone, just in case it's been slacking. You glance at the others, still playing with bones. Still muttering to tokens, still rubbing fingers over knots, coins, and wood. Each little ritual, each belief a tether to something, anything they can control. Because when you're floating in the middle of nowhere, soaked to the bone with a captain losing his shine and clouds that won't quit, sometimes belief is the only dry thing left. You find a quiet spot if such a thing exists on a ship during a storm and settle near the aft bulkhead, knees pulled up trying not to listen to the wind. It moans through the rigging like some sea god with a grudge. You'd laugh at the drama of it if your back didn't ache from days of damp. Then you see it, someone pulling out a bundle of paper, pressed flat between waxed cloth and string. Letters. The pirate handles them like treasure. Each page crinkled and ink-stained, some barely legible anymore. He doesn't read them aloud. He just opens one and stares, lips moving slightly as if the words are already etched in memory. You look away, not out of disinterest but respect. Letters at sea are like ghosts. You acknowledge them. You let them pass through. Then it hits you, you have one too. Tucked deep in your coat lining, folded so many times the creases have become part of the page. You pull it out. It's faint, smudged at the corners, but the name at the top still shows. Yours. In handwriting you haven't seen in months, maybe years. You read it again. You always do during storms. There's no update, no new news. Just the same, words the same goodbye, the same little note of hope written by someone who thought you'd be back sooner. Here's your historical fact. Pirates often wrote letters, though they rarely sent them. Without access to regular post, most letters were more journal than correspondence. They were written in quiet moments, folded carefully, and stored in oilskin. Some were handed off at port if luck allowed. Others, well, they never left the ship. You trace the last line again with your finger. Don't forget what the stars looked like from our porch. You smile at the image even as the rain lashes against the hull behind you. Porch, stars. You barely remember dry land, let alone constellations not half covered by cloud. Nearby, another pirate is writing. Ink quill careful strokes tongue between teeth. The paper is damp, but he's pressing forward anyway, using the ship's rocking-like punctuation. What are you writing, you ask? Dunno yet, he says. Maybe a story, maybe a lie. They feel the same when it's raining. You chuckle. That tracks. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some pirates wrote entire journals disguised as letters to loved ones, even if they had no one in particular. It gave their thoughts a direction, a destination, even if that destination never existed. You watch as another man dictates a letter to a younger crewmate. The older pirate can't write, but he can remember every word. Tell her I'm not dead yet, he says, grinning through a gap in his teeth. Tell her I'm wetter than a codfish and twice as slippery. And tell her he pauses. Actually, leave that part out. The scribe nods, scratching furiously. You take a scrap of parchment from your own bundle. Blank, clean, unspoken. You don't know what to say. Dear, no, not that. To the one who still remembers me. That feels closer. You start slow, nothing fancy, just the truth. Or a truth at least. I woke up to the sound of rain again. The sky hasn't changed in days, and I think my socks are developing personalities. The captain's trying not to look nervous. That means we're all nervous. I played a game of dice and won a dried prune, which I traded for half a biscuit and a piece of questionable cheese. The economy is thriving. I miss stars, and fire that doesn't flicker in time with the waves, and walking somewhere that doesn't move beneath you. If you're reading this somehow, know that I still remember the sound of your laugh. It's louder than this storm even now. You stop writing, fold it carefully, no one will read it. But maybe that's not the point. Historians still argue whether pirates felt homesick. Some say they severed ties completely, choosing the sea as their only home. Others believe the writing, the letters, the saved scraps of ribbon and bone trinkets point to men who missed someone more than they admitted. You believe the latter. You tuck the letter beside the old one. Now you have two. A collection. Not quite a logbook, not quite a confession, just pieces of you stored away. The wind kicks up again. You hear someone above trip on the slick deck, followed by a string of swears and a clatter of rope. Life continues. But below the crew is quiet, some writing, some reading, some staring at the wood grain like it holds a map to somewhere warmer. One pirate holds a ring in his palm, small and plain, turns it over and over with thumb and forefinger. He doesn't wear it, just watches it spin. You don't ask. He doesn't offer. The cat jumps onto your lap and immediately shakes its fur. You're soaked all over again, but you scratch behind its ear anyway. There's comfort here, in the silence, in the words never sent, in the ghosts of sentences written for people you may never see again. Because on rainy days at sea, not all storms happen outside the ship. Some are quiet, ink on paper, memories kept dry inside coats that haven't been dry in days. You'd think pirates would fear cannonballs, swords, or betrayal most. And sure, all of that is plenty terrifying. But you right now would trade all of it to avoid what's happening in the corner of the hold. Someone has a toothache. A bad one. He's groaning, slumped against a crate, holding his jaw like it's planning to leap off his face. His skin's gone a shade paler than even the storm should allow. Every few minutes, he lets out a soft, low moan that makes everyone within 10 feet tense up like they're bracing for an explosion. Tooth pain at sea during a rainstorm. There are few worse combinations. No escaping it. No distraction strong enough to forget it. And crucially, no real dentist aboard. Here's your historical fact. Dental care aboard pirate ships was creative, to say the least. Most ships didn't carry a dedicated doctor, let alone a dentist. The job usually fell to the quartermaster, the cook, or anyone with a steady hand and the ability to withstand screams. Today, that's Stubbs. He's not a doctor, he's not even good with a spoon, but he's got the most experience removing things with tongs, usually fish hooks from boots. Now he's volunteered to handle the extraction. You're not sure if it's out of kindness or boredom, but either way, he's rolling up his sleeves with grim determination. The tool's a pair of iron pliers, a swig of the last decent rum, and a wooden spoon to bite on. The patient poor soul is trembling, not from fear he's past fear, but from anticipation. That horrible, low-burning dread that builds when you know pain is coming, but you can't do anything to stop it. You step back, far back. You like your teeth exactly where they are. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirate crews used gunpowder or crushed cloves to dull dental pain. Others preferred rum-soaked rags or in some cases actual gunfire. One desperate man had a tooth shot out using a flintlock pistol and a spoon for aim. That one at least ended the pain. And nearly his jaw. Stubbs positions the pliers. The crew gathers because nothing draws attention like someone else's suffering. The cat hops onto a crate and watches with morbid curiosity. The man bites the spoon. His hands clench. One pirate mutters a prayer to Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of toothaches, then quickly pretends he didn't. A beat. Then Stubbs pulls. It's not quick. The groan that follows is deep guttural and so raw it cuts through the storm's howling. You flinch. Everyone does. The spoon snaps in half. The tooth doesn't come free. Stubbs mutters a curse and adjusts the angle. Hold still, mate, he says, as if that's remotely possible. Historians still argue whether tooth pulling was common aboard pirate ships or if it was a last resort. Some suggest it was rare due to the risk of infection. Others believe that with no alternative teeth came out at the first sign of trouble. Either way, it was brutal. The second pull works. Kind of. The tooth pops loose with a horrible crunch squish, and the poor sailor goes limp like someone cut his strings. Stubbs holds the tooth up like a trophy. It's cracked bloody and looks like it's been through a war, which in a way it has. Someone cheers. Someone else vomits. Both feel appropriate. The patient gets a swig of rum and a pat on the back. He mumbles something about never chewing again. Stubbs drops the tooth into a tin cup. Good luck charm, he says. You decide never to borrow anything from Stubbs. The mood shifts from tense to weirdly celebratory. The danger's past. No one died. That counts as a win. You overhear one pirate joke. Well, at least now the rain's not the worst thing happening. Another replies, speak for yourself. My hammock's wetter than a fish's handshake. Laughter bubbles up, not because it's particularly funny, but because it's needed. Relief is its own kind of storm. You return to your own spot teeth, suddenly more precious than gold. You poke at them one by one, checking for sensitivity like a paranoid parrot checking its feathers. Still there. Still mostly solid. You watch the patient drift off to sleep, the pain finally dulled by alcohol shock and sheer exhaustion. He's still clutching his jaw, but his expression is peaceful. He survived the worst dentist visit of his life in the middle of the ocean during a storm surrounded by pirates. That's something. Later, you find the tooth cup sitting unattended. Inside are 3 other teeth, worn, yellowed, chipped. You wonder if they belong to other crewmates or were simply collected. Pirate trophies. Tiny reminders of what pain looks like in miniature. You leave it alone. The storm doesn't let up, but the tension does. There's a strange camaraderie that forms after shared trauma, even if that trauma was mostly someone else's. One pirate starts a limerick. There once was a lad with a jaw who moaned like a thunderous saw. He stops there, can't find a rhyme, blames the weather. You don't mind. You're too busy swishing your mouth with tea and promising your molars you'll treat them better if they just stay put. Because you've learned something new tonight. Rain's bad. Moldy biscuits are worse. But dental drama in the middle of the sea. That's the kind of nightmare you don't forget. The scent hits you before the noise does something foul, sharp, almost vinegary. You wrinkle your nose and follow it like a bloodhound with second thoughts. The culprit. The hold. Again. You duck through the doorway, careful not to trip on the loose coil of rope someone left exactly where everyone walks. Inside, the smell gets worse. Wet socks, rotting rope, unwashed everything, and something you can't quite place that might be ancient fish stew having a second career as a floor stain. This officially is the worst-smelling corner of the ship. You make your way through crates, barrels, and hunched bodies searching for a spot to sit. Eventually, you find a dry-ish plank between a hanging hammock and a stack of netting. It's not ideal, but it's breathable. Sort of. You shift your weight, and a wet squelch echoes beneath you. You freeze. Did you just sit on a rat-a sock? Some hybrid of the two, you don't look. It's better that way. Here's your historical fact. Pirate ships often smelled atrocious, with no real plumbing, limited fresh water, and days, sometimes weeks between proper cleanings. The air below deck could become thick enough to chew. Bilge water, mold old food, and worse, all mingled into a symphony of stink. You fan your shirt. Bad move. That just frees up the underlayer scent, old rum, old sweat, and that faint citrus hint of a lime you once touched 6 ports ago. From a few paces away, someone is scrubbing a boot with a rag and muttering, "It used to be leather. You're not sure what it is now, but it shines in a way leather never should." Another pirate is emptying a bucket of gray water into a crack in the deck. "Drain goes straight to the bilge," he says cheerfully. "Adds flavor to the soup." He's probably joking. Probably. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirate crews used herbs like rosemary or mint to mask the stink of the hold. Not for hygiene, just to survive the smell. A few particularly desperate ships reportedly burned dried orange peels or even their old clothes to freshen the air. The smell of burning socks arguably better than the alternative. You glance around. Someone's got their boots off. You regret it instantly. The toes are alive. You mean that metaphorically. You hope. A rat scurries across the beam above you, then stops. Just sits there, staring, like it owns the place, like you're the unwelcome guest. You nod politely. No sudden movements. Historians still argue whether pirate ships were truly as filthy as described, or whether tales of stink were exaggerated by later writers. But most agree without fresh air, without regular scrubbing, and without discipline, the lower decks could quickly become a petri dish with sails. A crewmate beside you lights a pipe. The smoke curls upward, spicy and thick. It doesn't fix the smell, but it changes it. You inhale deeply. It's like tasting cinnamon over a dead fish. Still, it helps. Someone nearby begins airing out his shirt by flapping it rapidly, creating a breeze that causes 3 other pirates to gag. He looks pleased with himself. Further aft, 2 sailors are arguing over whose hammock smells worse. It escalates until they switch hammocks out of spite. Both immediately regret it. The cat appears. Of course it does. Glides in like royalty steps over feet, sniffs at one boot, and curls up in the cleanest pile of laundry it can find. One pirate lunges toward it in protest, but the cat hisses. He backs off. She's in charge now. You open your coat slightly and pat the inside pocket still dry. That's where you keep your one handkerchief soaked in lavender water, a gift from a portside friend. You press it to your nose and breathe like it's life itself. This is luxury. This is survival. Overhead, rain continues its steady beat, mixing with the drip, drip, drip of condensation from the beams. You look up. A fat droplet lands directly in your eye. You sigh, wipe your face, except that you now taste like mildew and regret. Someone walks by carrying a bucket of something truly unspeakable and shouts, "Heads up!" You duck instinctively. A moment later, a slosh splashes the wall inches from where you were sitting. The smell is immediate and horrifying. Whatever was in that bucket had opinions. You relocate. Find a slightly less stinky patch near the wall next to a man who is sewing socks and humming. He offers you a nod. Doesn't speak. Just keeps stitching. His socks are mismatched and damp, but he seems proud. You pull off your boot and pour out a puddle. You think you see something move. You don't investigate. Nearby, the quartermaster is walking slowly, making notes on a scrap of parchment. He sniffs the air, grimaces, and adds something. You glance at the paper. It reads, "Hold status unholy. Fresh water low. Smell, wash aggressive. Burn laundry tomorrow." You approve. At some point, someone opens a barrel of pickled eggs. That's it. That's the whole disaster. The lid comes off and the air changes. Half the crew bolts. One pirate gags. Another shouts, "Seal it. Seal it." The lid slams shut, crisis narrowly avoided. You rest your back against the bulkhead and sigh. You've adjusted to the stink. That's the most dangerous part, when your body gives up and accepts the air as normal. But maybe that's life at sea, lowering your standards until survival feels like success. One breath at a time. The rain keeps falling. And somewhere in the distance, you swear you can still smell those eggs. It's too wet to sleep, too dark to work, and too loud to think. So naturally, someone suggests sword practice. You glance up from your spot on the floor where you've been balancing a cup of tea on your knee for the better part of 10 minutes. Sword practice, you echo, like maybe you misheard. You didn't. I, says Jory, a wiry man with too much energy and not enough sense. We've gone soft sitting around. Rain or no rain, we sharpen or we sink. You'd argue with him, but he's already clearing space in the middle of the hold. Crates get shoved aside, hammocks are pushed back, and soon there's a ring of bored pirates watching two half-sane men wave cutlasses at each other in a room barely tall enough to stand upright in. You sigh down your tea and stand. Because he's right, sort of. Here's your historical fact. Pirate crews often drilled, especially when stuck at sea. Boarding ships, sword handling, knot work, even cannon reloads. You had to stay sharp literally and figuratively if you wanted to survive a raid. Rainy days were perfect for this, assuming you didn't slip and accidentally impale a friend. Someone tosses you a cutlass. It's not yours, but it's balanced well enough. You test the weight, give it a spin, and accidentally flick a droplet of water into your eye. The audience snickers. Across from you, Jory grins and takes a wide stance. His boots squelch as he shifts. The deck is slick with condensation. Every step feels like a gamble. But you nod. Let's see if muscle memory still counts in puddles. You lunge. He parries. A satisfying clang echoes through the hold, followed by enthusiastic whooping. Not because the technique is good, it's probably not, but because anything not involving soup singing or sitting in mold is exciting right now. The match continues. You trade blows, not hard, just enough to make the wrists sting and the hearts race. You slip once, catch yourself with a knee, then roll into a swing that would have taken Jory's hat off if he hadn't already lost it to the storm 2 days ago. Close, someone laughs, nearly cut his thoughts in half. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirate crews practiced with sticks instead of blades, both to preserve weapons and to avoid accidental injuries. Others used dull-edged sabers or makeshift swords carved from wood. A few rowdy groups even practiced in the nude, supposedly to discourage hesitation. You're grateful this is not one of those crews. Another pirate steps in after Jory bows out. This one's broader, slower, but with heavy footwork that makes the deck thud under each step. You adjust your grip. Wet hands. Slippery handle. You consider wrapping your sleeve around the hilt, but too late, he's already charging. You sidestep and deflect. Sparks fly. The smell of metal mixes with rain and salt and sweat. Mind the lantern, someone shouts. You duck just in time to avoid slicing through a rope holding the ship's only steady light. The cat meows in protest from its perch nearby, unimpressed by your near decapitation of its shadow. The match ends in a draw, or at least a mutual decision to stop before one of you knocks over the stew pot again. You fall back into the crowd, grinning, breathing hard. Your arms ache. Your back soaked, but you feel awake, alive. Someone starts reloading pistols next, carefully, slowly. You wince at the memory of the last time someone fired one indoors during a storm. It wasn't an accident. It was a test. The man's still partially deaf. You watch as a group forms a line near the cannon station. No live powder, thankfully just dry runs. They load, swab, aim, repeat. A rhythm forms clean and mechanical, and it drowns out the drip, drip, drip of the rain for a while. Historians still argue whether pirates maintained a consistent training regimen or relied on pure chaos and bravado. Some evidence suggests formal drills were rare. Others believe the best crews practiced daily rain or shine. It likely depended on the captain and how many fights the crew had survived to realize they needed more practice. You grab a rope and join another group rehearsing boarding technique. The idea is to swing across the deck like you're jumping from one ship to another, in the rain, with no safety net. It's ridiculous. You try anyway. First attempt a sad hop that lands you flat on your back. Laughter erupts. Second attempt better, though you graze your elbow on a barrel. You call it controlled chaos. They call it splash art. Third attempt. You nail it. Land on your feet barely. And raise your arms like a gymnast sticking a landing on a swaying waterlogged log. Someone throws you a biscuit in celebration. You catch it. You eat it. Regret it. As the practice winds down, a few pirates begin sharpening blades. The rhythmic shuk-shuk of stone on steel is oddly calming. You sit nearby, checking your cutlass for rust, wiping the blade dry, then oiling it with a scrap of cloth and a few drops of leftover lamp oil. It gleams under the lantern light, a reminder that out here, maintenance is survival. And while no one says it out loud, you all know the truth. The storm won't last forever. When it ends, you'll be back to chasing merchant sails on the horizon, grappling hooks in hand, pistols, loaded blades ready. So you train, you swing, you practice in puddles. Because pirates don't just wait out the rain. They sharpen themselves in it. There's no such thing as a break on a pirate ship, not really. Even when you're off duty, there's always someone shouting your name, or a barrel rolling loose, or a leak springing from a crack you swore was solid yesterday. So when the boatswain announces it's your turn for rain watch, you don't even bother protesting. You pull your coat tighter, soaked already, and drag yourself topside like a condemned man climbing the gallows. Rain watch, as the name implies, is exactly what it sounds like. You stand in the rain. You watch. That's it. Not for ships because nothing's visible beyond the fog. Not for stars because the clouds are hoarding them. Just watch. For anything. For nothing. You emerge onto the deck where the world is wind and wetness. It's quieter than you expect. No shouting, no sails flapping, just the creak of timbers and the steady pat-pat-pat of water dripping from every rope and surface like the ship itself is weeping. You head toward the quarterdeck, slipping twice and catching yourself on a rail that squelches under your palm. Lovely. Here's your historical fact. Pirate crews rotated watches throughout the day and night, dividing the work so no one stayed on duty too long, though in bad weather shifts often extended due to short-staffing illness or sheer exhaustion. The rain watch wasn't official, but it became tradition. If you drew the short straw, you got the wet one. You reach the watch post and lean on the railing. Rain immediately slaps your face like it missed you personally. You wipe your eyes and squint into the fog. Nothing. Just the ghost gray outline of your own ship vanishing into mist. You mutter to yourself quietly, narrating your misery like a scholar documenting a tragic experiment. Subject is now entering hour 4 of slow, continuous drowning while upright. Morale low. Boots full. The fog swirls. You imagine shapes in it, ship's sea serpent support with a hot meal and a dry bed. But it's all vapor and wishful thinking. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some pirates believed rain watches were cursed shifts. If you saw a phantom ship in the fog, you weren't supposed to speak of it until dawn or risk calling it toward you. One Jamaican crew reportedly turned their ship a full 180 degrees after a lookout claimed he'd seen sails that vanished mid-blink. They renamed the shift Ghost Watch for months. You blink into the nothingness and remind yourself not to see anything. The cold creeps in. It starts in your fingers, then slips into your boots, climbs your legs like a rising tide. You shift from foot to foot, trying to keep the blood moving. Try to flex your fingers, but they feel like soggy ropes. You hum a tune under your breath, not a shanty this time, just a slow, aimless melody, half lullaby, half weather complaint. Your thoughts start to wander. How many days has it been? You try to count, but can't remember when the sky wasn't gray. Your concept of time has dissolved into before the biscuits went green and after the tooth incident. A seagull cries overhead. You squint upward, surprised. A gull out here. It swoops once, then vanishes. Strange. Or maybe not. Everything is strange after enough time in the rain. The ship moans beneath you. A long, low creak, followed by a soft drip from a nearby beam. You glance down. Water's pooling in the scuppers again. Someone will have to mop it before it soaks the powder crates. Probably you. Again. You sigh and tap the deck with your boot. The wood responds with a hollow thunk. Still sound. Still holding. Barely. Historians still argue whether rain watch was punishment or necessity. Some claim it was reserved for the clumsiest, the drunkest, or the newest aboard. Others say every sailor took their turn because the ocean didn't care who was standing guard when the wave came. Either way, you're here now, and the wave hasn't come. Yet. You reach into your coat and pull out a flask. Empty. You shake it anyway. One drop clings to the bottom. You tilt it back and catch it on your tongue like a child hoping for honey. It's mostly rainwater now. Fitting. Someone below slams a hatch. A muffled curse follows. You smile. At least you're not alone in your misery. Eventually you see movement, a shadow crossing the far side of the deck. Another sailor swapping shifts. He lumbers toward you like a wet bear, muttering something about watching clouds mate. You nod. He nods. That's enough communication. You step aside and head back below. Each step down the ladder is a slippery threat. You descend slowly, boots squelching, and feel the warmth hit you like a sigh when you reach the hold. It's not warm exactly, but less cold. Close enough. You peel off your coat. Water runs off like a miniature waterfall. Someone groans. Don't drip on the cards. Not a drop left in me, you reply, voice hoarse. You flop into a corner and exhale. Your fingers tingle. You flex them, glad they're still responding, just barely. The rain hasn't stopped. The storm hasn't broken. But your shift is over, and for now, that's enough. You close your eyes and smile. Let someone else watch the rain for a while. By now, your musket feels like part of your arm, though heavier, wetter, and slightly more likely to explode. You're sitting below deck with it disassembled on your lap, carefully wiping the barrel with an oiled rag. It's tedious, yes, but necessary. Moisture in black powder mix about as well as swords in swimming. Rain outside still taps a lazy rhythm overhead. You've grown used to it like a ticking clock you can't shut off. But your focus now is keeping this weapon dry enough to not misfire, because the last thing you want is to be the guy whose pistol fizzles during a boarding. Here's your historical fact. Pirates used flintlock muskets and pistols, which were notoriously unreliable in wet weather. Rain and humidity could dampen the powder jam the trigger or weaken the flash. Crews often spent rainy days meticulously cleaning and re-oiling their weapons, fighting rust as much as boredom. You check the lock plate, pry loose a chunk of soot, and shake your head. One good storm, you mutter, and this becomes a club. Nearby, another pirate is drying bullets near a lantern, rolling them between cloth to rub off any corrosion. These'll split the barrel if they stay wet, he says. Like loading a soup dumpling. He grins. You do not. A third man's poking at a pistol that refuses to click. Think the flint's dead, he says. I've hit it 6 times. Nothing. He swaps it with a small triangle of rock from a pouch and tries again. Click. Sparks dance. You both nod in approval. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirates tested gunpowder by tasting it. A tangy, sharp flavor meant it was still dry. If it turned to paste on the tongue, bad news. It sounds reckless, but a quick taste sometimes beat a faulty shot. Historians still argue how often pirates clean their firearms. Some records describe strict maintenance schedules. Others suggest muskets were neglected until needed, then frantically wiped down. You suspect the truth depends on how many times someone's seen a gun fail mid-fight. You reassemble your musket-running fingers over each piece. The flint's chipped but sharp. The barrel at least is clear. You secure it beside you and wipe down your powder horn, next checking for clogs or moisture near the cap. Someone sneezes hard nearby. You look over, see powder dust bloom in the air like a tiny mushroom cloud. Bless you, you mutter. The quartermaster walks by, inspecting weapons. He gives yours a once-over and grunts. Don't let it rust, he says. Rust kills faster than lead. He taps the barrel with a knuckle and moves on. You spend the next half hour oiling the smaller parts, ramrod, tip trigger springs, even the butt plate. It's meditative in its own grim way. You feel a strange pride keeping something functional while the rest of the ship decays around you. Outside, a flash of lightning illuminates the hatch. You hear a crack, then a long rolling boom. Thunder, loud enough to rattle the beams. Someone shouts, "That's close," and makes the sign against bad luck. You load your musket anyway, slowly, carefully, just in case. Because if a ship does appear in this soup of rain and fog, your life may depend on whether your powder stayed dry. Rain seeps into everything. The deck, your clothes, your boots, your bones, and now the crew's collective sanity. It's no surprise when you start hearing voices in the dark that aren't quite jokes anymore. You're curled in your usual damp spot near the midship bulkhead, listening to the wind groan like an old man with secrets. The lantern flickers. The dice games are done. The shanties have dried up. And in the lull, you hear it. Doesn't even know what he's doing. You glance toward the whisper, 2 men heads close together, not loud but not hiding either. One of them glances toward the captain's quarters, and that's enough. Here's your historical fact. Pirate captains ruled by consensus. Unlike naval commanders, they didn't hold permanent authority. If the crew lost confidence, a vote could strip a captain of his command instantly. Mutiny wasn't just a possibility, it was a pressure valve built into the system. The murmurs grow louder over the next few hours. Little things. Comments about the course, gripes about rations, side eyes when the captain walks by, the sort of tension that simmers just beneath the surface looking for a crack. You're not the only one who notices. The quartermaster starts hovering, more sticking close to high-ranking crew. The bosun sharpens his knife more publicly than usual. and the cook, normally a grump with no patience for anything, not bubbling in a pot, goes silent. Someone asks, "You hear what he did to the last captain?" Nobody answers, because everyone has heard. Here's your quirky tidbit. Pirate mutinies didn't always end in bloodshed. Sometimes a captain was simply marooned, left on a small island with food water and a pistol with one shot. It was meant to be merciful, but mercy runs thin in the rain. You're torn. The captain has kept the ship afloat. He hasn't panicked, hasn't screamed, but he's quieter now, distant, eyes fixed on horizons that aren't visible. Some say he's waiting for the stars. Others say he's lost the plot. Last night, someone saw him pacing the upper deck barefoot, staring up at the clouds as if trying to read them like a map. Talking to the sky, the sailor said. Didn't blink for 10 minutes. You saw him too. Wet calm, quiet as moonlight. It was unsettling. Historians still argue how often pirate crews turned on their captains during long storms or uneventful voyages. The conditions were ripe for suspicion, cramped quarters, bad food, conflicting egos. And when lightning flashed and direction faltered, leadership often became a target. That night, a fistfight breaks out in the hold. At first, you think it's over a blanket again. But when one man shouts you'd follow a blind rat into a reef, you realize it's bigger than that. It's about trust. Or the lack of it. The fight is broken up quickly, no blades, not yet, but the damage is done. Whispers become sentences, sentences become arguments. The word vote gets tossed around. You clean your pistol again quietly, not because you expect to use it, but because now you might. A storm outside is nothing compared to one within, and this one's getting louder. It's the cat that gives it away. She's usually indifferent to everything storms shouting stew. But tonight, she's jumpy. Her tail twitches, her ears flatten, and she's not lounging in the usual coil of rope. She's gone, disappeared into the beams above where no one can reach her. You don't blame her. Because tonight, the ship feels wrong. The air is charged, not with thunder, but something quieter, more personal, the kind of tension you feel in your stomach before a punch lands. Conversations stop when you walk past. Men sit in tighter circles. Hands rest on hilts. No one's playing dice anymore. Then the captain enters the hold. Not dramatic. Just a man wet from rain-jaw set coat clinging to him like a second skin. He stands near the main lantern and says simply, "We'll talk." And that's when it begins. Here's your historical fact. Pirate crews often held formal votes on leadership. These weren't spur-of-the-moment rebellions, but structured discussions, grudging, tense, and deadly serious. The captain spoke. The quartermaster countered. The crew decided. Not every captain went down swinging. Some simply stepped aside. Others didn't. Tonight, your crew's not shouting. They're listening. The captain raises a hand. I know the storm's worn you thin. I know you're cold sick of rain, sick of me. A few nods, a few glares. But we're still floating, he continues. And I've not run us into rocks. I've not fed you to the sea. And if you'd rather elect someone else, you'll get your vote. But it won't be now. Not in a storm. Not when the horizon's gone blind. You don't know what's more unnerving, the calm in his voice or the silence that follows. Here's your fringe tidbit. One pirate captain, Bartholomew Roberts, once shut down a mutiny by offering every dissatisfied man the next boat ashore with one condition: they had to walk there now, in the middle of the ocean. The message landed. Your captain stands still waiting. One man rises, not a mutineer, just uncertain. I say we wait, he mutters. Storm's not done. Neither are we. That breaks the spell. Slowly the crew eases. Not completely, but enough. Tension drains like water through a crack. The captain steps back, not triumphant, just tired. You exhale, and for the first time in days, the hold feels still. The cat returns a few minutes later, jumps back into her coil, curls up, and closes her eyes. Message received. By the next morning, or what passes for it under the smothering quilt of gray, the rain has gentled to a persistent mist. It clings to everything like the sea is whispering, I'm not finished with you yet. But after last night's tension, mist feels like mercy. You head above deck for your shift and find the navigator hunched over a table that's clearly seen better decades. He's got a scroll of soaked parchment weighed down with bits of broken iron and a very determined scowl. The ink is smudged in places, the lines warped from moisture, and there's a suspicious tear running through Hispaniola. You sit beside him, careful not to shift the weights, still trying to find us. No, he grunts, trying to find the sun. He jabs at the parchment with a charcoal nub, smearing longitude like it personally insulted him. If I knew where the clouds ended, we'd be halfway to Havana by now. You glance around the deck. No horizon, no shadows, no change in the endless damp canvas overhead. Here's your historical fact. Navigation during storms or prolonged overcast conditions was a nightmare. Pirates relied on celestial navigation stars, sun and moon. Without those, you were dead reckoning literally, estimating speed, direction, and position based on guesswork memory and stubbornness. The navigator mutters, "If I had just 1 hour of clear sky." He trails off. You suspect he's been saying that for days. Nearby, a young crewmate is unrolling another map, this one stitched together from scraps. A custom chart, they call it. You call it optimism on paper. It's covered in inked X's and notes like, "Possibly cursed," "Ask Carlos," and "Looks like an island didn't stop." You peer over their shoulder. One mark glows with legend Treasure Cove. If real, probably isn't, but probably has never stopped a pirate before. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirates kept dream maps, unverified, impossible, or stolen charts depicting rumored ports, sunken cities, or sea routes seen in half-drunken visions. They were rarely accurate, but sometimes they were just enough to keep the tradition alive. The captain joins the group, dripping and silent. He leans over the main chart, traces a line with one finger, and murmurs, "If we're not off course now, I'll eat my hat." Someone offers him a fork. He doesn't laugh. Still, he orders sail trimmed and the ship nudged slightly westward, not because he knows where you're going, but because some direction feels better than none. Historians still argue whether pirate maps were more art than science. Some were detailed, true nautical works, complete with coastal soundings and wind notes. Others were closer to myths scribbled on napkins. A few were entirely fabricated to trick rivals into chasing phantoms. Cartographic catfish. You help the navigator dry the map with a patch of muslin and a bit of your breath. He glares at the stains. Ink's half gone, he mutters. Could be worse, though. Could be last week's chart. What happened to that one, you ask? Used it as kindling during the stew incident. You decide not to pursue that story. Later, someone unearths a compass that still mostly works. The needle spins a few times, wobbles, then settles north-ish. That's enough. The navigator holds it reverently, as if the tiny iron shiv can steer the whole world. From the upper deck, a lookout shouts down, "Still nothing but gray." And yet, there's a strange light to the sky now. Not sunshine, not quite, but the idea of it. The kind of brightness that makes shadows reappear in the grain of the wood. The kind that just hints that above the clouds the sun still exists. You find yourself staring upward, eyes burning, just hoping for a break. A sliver of blue, a single ray. Nothing. But the mist feels thinner. Back near the table, the navigator's sketching new notes measurements of wave frequency, wind strength, swell angles. All guesswork, but he writes with urgency, like he's building a ladder from data rung by slippery rung. You pitch in. Take a length of twine mark off paces from bow to stern, help measure drift. It's not exact science. It's not even half science, but it gives the crew something to do besides wait. By dusk, the charts are folded, not dry, but usable. The ink has bled, but the lines remain, faint, determined, like the crew. You turn to the sea, still gray, still fog, but now somewhere out there is a heading, not a certainty, just a possibility. And for pirates, that's more than enough. When you wake, your throat feels like sandpaper dipped in salt. Every breath rasps. Your joints ache in places you didn't even know had joints, and your head pounds in rhythm with the creaking of the ship. You're not alone. Across the hold, 2 other pirates are hacking into rags. One's got a nose that won't stop dripping. The other just lies there, groaning eyes, glassy sweat beading on his forehead, even though the air is cold and wet enough to chill a crab. The doctor, or rather the closest thing to one, appears at your side. His name is Elsby. No one knows where he learned medicine. Some say he apprenticed with a real surgeon in London. Others say he just read a pamphlet once and never stopped pretending. Either way, you're in his hands now. Lucky you. He leans over and sniffs. Not you, your breath. Then he frowns and nods. Yep, he mutters, that's a cold, or scurvy, or the beginning of a lung rot. Probably all 3. You croak out something resembling great. He rummages in a pouch and produces a dried, wrinkled onion. Without ceremony, he slices it in half and presses it to your chest like it's a holy relic. Onion poultice, he says. Old cure. Pulls the damp out. It does not. It does, however, make you smell like stew. Here's your historical fact. Pirate medicine was more superstition than science. Ships rarely carried trained surgeons. Doctors were often just experienced sailors with strong stomachs and a few knives. Treatments included bloodletting, herbs, burning wounds closed, or simply hoping really hard while chewing bark. You're given a tin cup filled with something that smells like boiled socks and regret. Ginger tea, Elsby says. You sip. It burns. He's not wrong, but you're also fairly sure there's a splash of rum and possibly a dead bug floating on top. In the corner, a man with a fever is whispering to the wall. Elsby gives him a nod, then pours a line of salt across the floor between him and the rest of the crew. Barrier, he says, keeps the sickness from walking out. You don't argue. You've seen stranger things at sea. Here's your quirky tidbit. One pirate remedy for a sore throat involved soaking a sock in rum, tying it around the neck, and reciting a prayer backwards. Another popular one for headaches. Rub fish oil on your temples and take a nap inside a sail. Science, not exactly. Smelly, absolutely. You shuffle topside for air wrapped in a damp blanket and wearing someone else's hat. The cold wind hits you like a slap, but at least it clears your head. Mostly. Another pirate nearby is using hot stones from the galley, wrapping them in rags and placing them on his chest. Keeps the lungs warm, he says, between coughs. Or maybe just makes me feel like I'm doing something. That sounds about right. Historians still argue whether pirates were healthier or sicker than their naval counterparts. On one hand, pirate crews chose their own food and weren't beholden to strict rations. On the other, they often went longer without fresh supplies, and illness could spread like fire in tight quarters. Back below deck, you try to sleep. Elsby returns once more, smears something on your forehead that smells suspiciously like garlic and horse sweat, and tells you not to eat anything green that doesn't move. You appreciate the advice. Somewhere in the dark, a sailor sings softly something low and sweet in a language you don't recognize. You don't need to. It's enough that it's gentle. You clutch the onion to your chest and drift, because on a pirate ship in the rain, you take your healing where you can find it. Even if it comes with a side of onion breath. There's no mirror on board, but if there were, you're certain your reflection would scream. Your hair feels like seaweed. Your face is crusted with something suspiciously resembling salt or possibly stew, and your clothes now qualify as a different element entirely. Somewhere between liquid and sorrow. Still, you're determined to feel presentable, so today's mission fashion, sort of. It starts innocently enough. You're wringing out your shirt for the fourth time when you notice another pirate attempting to reshape his wide-brimmed hat with a piece of wire in a spoon. You ask him what he's doing. Look good. Feel good, he says with a shrug, as if that's not the most absurd thing a man ankle-deep in bilge water has ever said. But he's got a point. So you start paying attention, and what you notice is this: everyone is trying in their own strange way to reclaim some dignity. Here's your historical fact. Pirates didn't wear rags by default. In fact, many went out of their way to appear flamboyant or intimidating. Silk sashes, feathered hats, jewelry pilfered from wealthier targets. These weren't just trophies, they were statements. Rain didn't stop vanity, it just made it soggier. A few crewmates are air-drying their coats over a weak galley flame. One is brushing mold off his boots with what appears to be a fishbone. Another is combing his beard with a fork. You, inspired, decide to polish your belt buckle. You use a scrap of shirt and some leftover oil from the lantern. It gleams for about 4 seconds before the mist fogs it up again. Still, you feel better. A man struts by in a bright red waistcoat. It's damp, fraying at the seams, and smells like vinegar, but he walks like a noble at court. Captain wore it once, he says proudly, before he gained a stomach. Another pirate ties a green sash around his arm, not for rank, not for utility, just color, something bold against the gray. He sees you watching and shrugs. Might as well go down dressed nice. Here's your quirky tidbit. Pirates often wore wildly mismatched clothing. It wasn't just because of loot or scarcity, it was also style. A Spanish silk shirt, Dutch breeches, and Turkish slippers. Why not? You fought hard for them. Might as well look like a walking ransom note. Someone pulls out a bit of charcoal and draws an anchor on his chest. Another paints stripes under his eyes with soot. You join in with a crude swirl on your forearm. No one asks what it means. It means something. You spot a guy wearing a necklace made of chicken bones. You're not sure if it's fashion or threat. Either way, it works. Historians still argue whether pirate fashion was purely functional or partially performative. The truth is probably both. Bright fabrics helped in boarding raids, identifying friend from foe, and elaborate dress could intimidate enemies. But it also gave pirates identity in a world that tried to erase them. You sit by a barrel and watch as someone stitches a patch onto his coat. It's shaped like a star. Probably not for rank, just flair, just pride. Even the cat looks smug today, perched atop a barrel like royalty, a strip of red cloth tied around its neck like a cravat. You suspect someone sacrificed a sleeve to make it. The air below deck smells marginally better than yesterday. Less stew, more charcoal, and damp wool. Not ideal, but improvement is improvement. Someone's attempting to dry lace cuffs using a bellows. It's going badly. The lace flutters like a moth in a storm. He doesn't stop. You rummage through your own stash and find a single glorious item, a sock that's almost dry. You wear it like a crown. No one laughs. They understand. By the time night falls, the hold looks like a circus tent collapsed on a library fire. Bright sashes, frayed hats, buttons polished with spit and hope. No logic, no uniform, just people refusing to let the rain define them. One pirate takes a bit of blue cloth and waves it dramatically. Royal blue, he declares. For Her Majesty me. Someone bows. Someone else curtsies. Someone trips and falls into a bucket. Laughter follows. Real laughter, not manic or desperate. Just people finding something ridiculous to celebrate. You lie back against your crate, damp but defiant. You're not dry. You're not warm. But for the first time in days, you feel sharp. Tonight the rain softens to a drizzle that sounds almost like applause. Gentle, patient clapping from the sky. It's just enough to convince a few restless pirates to crack open the barrels. Not of water, of rum. And just like that, the ship shifts again. Not physically, she's still rocking like a cradle, but mood-wise. You feel it in the hold, in the lazy smiles, in the way conversation slides from tense mutters into chuckles and low songs. Someone strikes a match, and the lantern light flickers golden against the soaked wood. The rum has arrived. So has the relief. Here's your historical fact. Pirates prized their rum stores, especially during long, miserable stretches at sea. It wasn't just about drinking, it was about morale unity and forgetting the bone-deep wetness of life at sea. Rum rations were often handed out sparingly. But when the time came, no one held back. The first cup is passed around like communion. You take a sip. It's sharp, warm, a little gritty, probably strained through someone's shirt, but it's heavenly. It spreads through you like a fire made of honey and smoke. A voice near the galley calls out to dry socks and dry spells, to no more stew, someone else yells. Unless it's fishless, a third adds, which gets a raucous laugh. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirate ships had to water down their rum to make it last longer or worse. Mix it with stagnant water and lemon peel to mask spoilage. Others infused it with spices, tobacco, or hot peppers for medicinal reasons. A few even believed that a drop of blood in the barrel kept curses at bay. You wouldn't be surprised if someone tries that tonight. A crewmate pulls out a fiddle that's missing a string but still sings. The melody rises over the gentle thrum of rain, mournful and strange, like an elegy for everything the sea forgot. Others hum along. One pirate grabs a spoon and starts drumming on an empty barrel. Another slaps the deck with both hands, offbeat but enthusiastic. Soon a rhythm forms. You clap along, then stomp, then sing. The lyrics, nonsense. A mix of ports and names and half-remembered curses all blended into something that somehow feels familiar. You don't know the words. Doesn't matter. You belong. Historians still argue whether pirates really sang so much, or if it's just a romantic myth. Some records describe constant music aboard ships, while others suggest strict captains banned noise entirely. What's certain is that when the rum flowed, the voices followed. You pass the bottle. It's warm now from hand to hand, almost sacred in its journey. No one chugs. Everyone sips, slowly, savoring the pause and misery. The rain outside grows shy. just a whisper now, and in its place, laughter, not wild, not sharp soft, like it belongs here. Someone tells a joke about a Spanish galleon, a goat, and a very confused priest. It makes no sense, but the punchline ends in a belch, and everyone wheezes. You almost drop your cup from laughing. Someone else starts a tale, real or imagine, about a cursed monkey paw that granted a wish for eternal youth, but turned the crew into children. They couldn't even hoist a sail without crying, he says. Another wave of laughter. Even the captain appears ducking through the beams, arms crossed but his lips curled into the barest hint of a smile. He accepts a cup, drinks, doesn't speak, just listens. The hold grows warmer, not in temperature, but in feeling, closer, less like a damp cave of strangers and more like a worn tavern full of tired friends. A pirate near you taps your shoulder and hands you a crude cup carved from driftwood. One more, he says, for tomorrow. You drink. It tastes like the sky, bittersweet and full of thunder. You lean back, watching smoke drift up to meet the last threads of mist above. You think of the stars hidden behind it all, still shining, probably laughing at you. But tonight the sea lets you have this. You close your eyes and let the song take you. Not a lullaby, not quite, but close enough. You wake to the sound of creaking wood, sloshing boots, and someone shouting, "Where's my other shoe?" A perfectly average pirate morning. The rum has worn off, but the fog hasn't. Still, there's something new in the air, an itch, a buzz, a shared electricity among the crew. You feel it as soon as you sit up. Today's the day. You don't know what day it is exactly, but something's going to happen. You clamber up the ladder toward the main deck. The clouds remain thick and moody, but the wind has changed. It smells different, briny crisp, less like wet rope, and more like something else entirely. Lands near, someone murmurs, not a declaration, a hunch. You reach the railing and scan the horizon. Nothing, just the same swells and vapor. But the crew knows. You can see it in the way they move. Less slogging, more purpose. Boots stomping, ropes pulled tighter, voices raised not in complaint, but anticipation. Here's your historical fact. Pirates often developed a supernatural sense for landfall. After months at sea, subtle changes in the wincy color bird calls and even cloud shapes signaled that land or ships were nearby. It wasn't magic. It was learned instinct. You sniff again. Seaweed. Palm, no, but definitely not storm. The navigator's on the quarterdeck, pointing at a spot in the mist where the waves seem to roll differently. Shoals, maybe, he mutters, or current shifting near a reef. Nearby, the quartermaster is inventorying supplies. 3 days of biscuits, 2 of salt beef, and 1 of hope, he grumbles. If there's no port soon, we'll be chewing sailcloth. You feel it too, that quiet desperation. A landfall means resupply dry feet trade, or at the very least, a change of scene. Here's your quirky tidbit. Pirates sometimes named landfalls by mood. Desperation Cove, Rum Point, or Don't Ever Come Back Island were all real places on real maps or real enough. These informal names gave geography a personality and turned miserable encounters into stories worth telling. You start prepping the deck. Buckets are sloshed, salts scrubbed off wood, sails are checked. The cat oddly perches at the prow like she's steering the ship with her tail. No one questions it. She's been right before. Historians still argue whether pirates navigated more by luck or skill. Some scholars insist they were master sailors with decades of experience. Others claim the sea did most of the work and the pirates just happened to hang on. Either way, they usually ended up where they wanted eventually. A lookout shouts, everyone freezes. Birds. Your eyes follow his finger, and there, wings slicing through mist. 3, maybe 4 gulls circling high, crying out over the fog. You watch them dive and bank and vanish. That's all the proof anyone needs. Land, the captain says, almost reverently. The energy spikes. Jokes fly. Maybe they've got fresh socks, someone hollers. Or stew without bones, another adds. You start counting the possibilities. Coconuts. Real vegetables. A night in a hammock that doesn't rock. Maybe even coin. Maybe trade. The ship lists slightly as the wind stiffens. You feel her lean into the current, like even she wants this. The sails groan with purpose. You're handed a spyglass, blurry cracked, but functional. You raise it, search the haze, and catch the faintest curve of something solid. Not cloud, not wave. Sure, it's far, but it's real. You lower the glass, your heart's pounding. You hadn't realized just how tight your chest had been. The endless sea, The rain, the sameness, and now, finally, an edge to all this gray. Even if it's just a muddy cove with 3 sad goats and a man selling turnips from a canoe, it's different. You feel laughter rise in your throat, not manic, not relief, just joy, pure and irrational. The crew begins calling out supplies to ready, casks, ropes, anything worth trading or dumping. Someone's polishing a pewter mug. Another's trying to brush their teeth with charcoal and vinegar. Everyone's preparing for civilization, or at least their closest approximation of it. The fog starts thinning, and in the growing light ahead, you see it. The dark silhouette of trees, real ones, with trunks and leaves. Land, and with it, a breath of dry air that tastes like freedom, or at least like the chance to stretch your legs without sliding into a hatch. You lean forward, gripping the railing. Because whatever waits on shore, supplies, stories, even trouble, it isn't the storm. And that for now is enough. By the time the anchor drops with a rusty clank into shallow water, the crew's already pushing each other aside for a glimpse of the shore. It's not exactly a bustling port, more like a soggy crescent of sand bordered by crooked palm trees, and maybe a shack or two hunched along the tree line. You, however, are too focused on not falling off the boat while hauling a crate of rum bottles that somehow survived the storm. Trade bait, someone says, padding it like a treasure chest, or bribe bait. Depends who we meet. A skiff is lowered, and the first group piles in with all the grace of cats in a bathtub. You go second feet, braced on the slick hull, one hand clinging to a rope, like it's promising you a better life. As the skiff glides across the gray-blue shallows, you can smell land. Not seaweed, not rot, but dirt. Wet earth. Actual soil. It hits you like a memory from a dream. Here's your historical fact. Pirates often made landfall not at major ports, but at secluded beaches, uncharted coves, or sympathetic outposts. These spots were used to rest, repair, resupply, and sometimes just breathe without the deck beneath you shifting like a drunk octopus. The skiff scrapes onto sand. Everyone scrambles ashore like they're storming paradise. One pirate actually drops to their knees and kisses the ground. You decide to not do that considering the visible crab activity nearby. You take your first steps on land and it's weird. Your legs used to swaying overcorrect. You lurch forward like a puppet with tangled strings. The sand isn't moving, but your balance thinks it is. Someone nearby groans. Why is the ground rocking? You nod in sympathy, then nearly fall over a coconut. Ahead, the tree line offers shade mystery and a surprising number of goats. No people in sight yet. You all fan out, keeping hands near hilts, but expressions neutral. After all, not every shore welcomes pirates with soup and hugs. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirates kept friendship flags aboard neutral or invented banners hoisted when approaching unknown coasts. The idea was to not immediately look like you're here to rob everyone, though the smell clothes and general pirate vibe usually gave it away anyway. A shout comes from deeper in the trees. Smoke over here. You push through brush and find a campfire recent, not blazing, but still warm. There are signs of life boot prints, a half-eaten mango, and an empty bottle with a cracked seal marked Barbados '02. They left in a hurry, someone says, or they saw us coming. Either way, it's enough to declare this a temporary base. Within an hour, the crews established what could generously be called a camp. Blankets laid out, fish roasting, boots drying on sticks. Someone's even fashioned a hammock between 2 trees, and a pirate is already asleep in it, snoring like thunder. You find a flat rock and sit. It's not dry, but it's not wet from above, and that alone feels like luxury. Nearby, someone hums a familiar shanty slow and low. A few voices join in softer now. Not raucous, just peaceful. Historians still argue how often pirate crews truly rested on land between raids. Some evidence suggests short stays days, at most due to risk of capture or betrayal. Others believe longer hidden retreats were common. The reality, likely both. You made the most of whatever ground you could trust. A crewmate plops beside you and hands you a hunk of grilled fish. Caught it with a spoon, he says proudly. You stare. Really? He grins. Well, the spoon helped. You chew slowly, feeling the unfamiliar sensation of solid food that hasn't been boiled into a liquid state of apology. The cat returns stalking confidently out of the trees with a mouse in her mouth. She's already gone native. The sun dips behind the hills. Clouds begin to thin, revealing finally slivers of open sky. Pink, orange, gold. A sunset. You forgot how colorful the world could be. You lean back against the rock arms behind your head. For the first time in what feels like years, you're not rocking, not wet, not cold. Just here, feet in the sand, belly full, sky open. And for tonight, that's enough. By morning, the beach looks like a scene from a half-forgotten dream. Crates scattered, hammocks swinging gently, pirates sprawled in every direction like driftwood with hats. Someone's roasting coconuts over a small fire, and the smoke smells faintly like burned hope and toasted ambition. You rise slowly. Your back cracks in protest, but you smile anyway. Your hair's stiff with salt, your boots are full of sand, and you can still taste last night's questionable fish, but you're dry. Gloriously dry. Across the clearing, two pirates are arguing over a coconut. One insists it's better fermented. The other insists he just wants a drink without hallucinating. A fair demand. The captain arrives holding a map that now looks more like a used napkin. He calls for a meeting under the largest palm tree crew, lazily shuffle over, yawning, scratching, occasionally sneezing. Today, he says, we fix the ship. We patch the sails, we boil the water, we clear the heads. He pauses. And if anyone finds a goat that isn't feral, we keep it. I want cheese before I die. Here's your historical fact. Landfall meant repair. Pirates used these breaks not just to sleep and hunt, but to retar rigging patch sails, dry gunpowder, and scour the ship's hull. A neglected vessel could fall apart mid-voyage. Maintenance wasn't glamorous, but it kept everyone alive. You're assigned to hull cleaning. Lucky you. Back at the shoreline, a group is already scraping barnacles from the ship's belly. The tide's out, exposing the beast's underbelly like a great barnacled whale. You join them armed with a chipped blade and a bad attitude. Scrape, scrape, slosh, repeat. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirates believed that barnacles were bad luck, especially if they clustered around the rudder. One superstition warned that if a barnacle looked like a skull, you should turn back immediately. You try not to look too closely. Over the next few hours, sails are hauled ashore to dry. Powder horns are unpacked and spread beneath the sun, guarded closely by sleepy-eyed pirates with nothing but flintlock envy and sunburn to show for it. The ship looks skeletal, with her sails removed naked almost. But with the mist gone and the breeze warm, there's energy again. No shouting, no grumbling, just the rhythmic work of a crew that remembers why they're here, not for comfort, but for freedom. Historians still argue whether pirates were truly democratic during landfalls. Some journals describe organized labor systems, others describe chaos brawls over food, and lazy afternoons disguised as productivity. It's likely both were true, depending on who had the rum. Someone nearby finds a patch of herbs growing in the sand and claims it cures toothache. Another pirate immediately eats a fistful. Time will tell. The cat supervises everything from a driftwood log tail twitching like a metronome. As you work, someone hums again. This time, the melody's familiar, one of those songs that sounds like it was always waiting in the wind. Soon, more voices join in, quiet at first, then bolder. A song of sailing, of sunburns and salt wounds, of stolen gold and lost sleep. You pause to catch your breath and realize you're happy, not because of where you are, but because of who you are with whom you are. A family of sorts, cobbled together from shipwrecks and bad decisions, but a family nonetheless. The sun creeps higher. Someone cracks open a fruit and hands you half. It's sour, messy, perfect. You eat it with your feet in the sand, eyes on the ship heart, surprisingly light. Because for the first time in what feels like forever, you're not just surviving, you're rebuilding. And maybe you're starting to believe in clear skies again. By late afternoon, the sails are patched, the hull is scraped, and most of the gunpowder is back in barrels, bone dry and warm from the sun. The ship, though still weary-looking, now seems eager again, like a dog that's finally shaken off the rain. The crew is re-energized too. That strange sluggishness that followed days of being stuck in soggy darkness has lifted. You can feel it in your legs when you walk. Your boots no longer squish. Your fingers no longer prune. You almost look like a pirate again instead of a moldy deck mop in trousers. Still, you're not sailing yet. Not quite. Before returning to sea, there's a final ritual to perform, one that every pirate ship, no matter how ragged or refined, must observe. Inventory. And, oh, what a joyful, chaotic process it is. Here's your historical fact. Pirates had strict systems for counting spoils, supplies, and weapons before setting sail. Though romanticized as anarchists, most pirate crews were shockingly organized. They took stock of everything right down to the number of nails. And if something went missing, fingers got pointed and occasionally cut off. The quartermaster stands with his ledger, a plank of wood with charcoal scribbles and shell notches, and calls out items while crew members drag them from piles, crates, and sometimes the underbrush. Rope. 4 coils. One's knotted like a wedding night gone wrong. Salt beef. 2 barrels, 1 suspect. Fresh water. A long pause. Enough for 5 days if we're saints. 2 if we're pirates. It goes on like that for hours. Gunpowder, canvas, tar, biscuits, citrus, if you can call 3 moldy limes citrus in weapons. You're assigned to inspect the pistols. Out of 2215, fire clean 4 misfire, and 3 are best described as decorative. Still, it's better than what you expected. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirates personalize their weapons with carvings, trinkets, or in one recorded case, chicken feathers glued along the barrel to distract the enemy. You actually find one today with a crude, smiling face etched into the handle. It grins at you as if to say, "Don't miss." Below deck, the galley's been restocked with coconuts, cured fish, and a suspicious quantity of something pickled that may or may not be tentacle. The cook, already back in form, waves you away and guards his domain like a dragon hoarding fish heads. Someone's rigging up a new hammock near the aft, claiming they earned it during the storm by not screaming louder than the thunder. No one disputes it. That alone feels like justice. Historians still argue whether pirate crews took inventory this seriously every time or only before major voyages. Some logs are shockingly detailed, while others read more like drunken poems. It's possible many ships balanced both planning with one hand, improvising with the other. Later, the captain paces the beach with the navigator. They speak in low voices, gesturing toward the horizon. You can't hear what's said, but you catch 2 words, sloop and revenge. You raise an eyebrow. The game is on. Soon the call goes out to prepare for departure. Sails are folded and lashed back aboard. Weapons are checked again. The cat is gently coaxed from her throne of firewood, looking offended but resigned. You help hoist the barrels back into the hold, passing them down like sacred relics. Each one thuds into place. The ship groans. She's ready. A few crew members take one last walk along the sand, collecting lucky stones, broken shells, and in one case, a stick shaped like a dagger. All treasures in their own way. You take a moment too. To breathe. To listen to the soft hush of waves. To feel what dry sand feels like under your fingers. And then you let it go. The skiff is loaded. The rowback is quieter than the arrival, more focused, determined. The anchor creaks as it lifts. The sails catch wind with a satisfying snap. You grip the railing, look back at the fading beach, and smile. Because whatever storm waits out there next, you're not the same pirate who entered the last one. You're sharper, saltier, ready. The ship is alive again. With the sails hoisted, the crew moving briskly, and the wind finally blowing in a straight line instead of spiraling like a lunatic, the deck hums with energy. It's the first real momentum you've felt in what feels like centuries. You tilt your face toward the sun, which miraculously exists again, and let it warm your rain-salted skin. Land slips away behind you, a smudge of green and gold in the rear view of your mind. Ahead lies open sea wide and moody, but this time it doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like a stage, and you're ready for the next act. You head to your post, ropes to check, powder to stow, decks to tidy. Pirate life doesn't slow even after rain. Here's your historical fact. Pirate crews were often most productive after landfall. The chance to rest, eat, and recover morale worked wonders. Many recorded raids took place within a week of resupply. You didn't just celebrate on land, you reloaded. Below deck, laughter still clings to the walls. Someone's hung a string of seashells above their hammock for luck. Another has painted a crude sun on a barrel, so the storm don't forget we're watching now. You touch it as you pass, just in case. The captain walks the deck with that old glint in his eye again. No speeches today, just presence, steady, observing, calculating. You hear whispers of new targets, a merchant cutter rumored to carry silver, a convoy hugging the coast, a galleon limping home after battle. Possibilities swirl like sea foam. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirate ships used divination before picking a target, flipping coins, reading dice, even dangling a needle over a map. Superstition and strategy often went hand in hand. After all, luck's as important as cannonballs when you're a gambler on water. Someone strikes up a song. Not a sad one this time. This one's bolder, faster, with stomps and claps. You join in without thinking, tapping the rail in rhythm. The sea glitters ahead, gray-blue, endless, but no longer oppressive. You look down and see dolphins cutting through the wake. A few pirates lean over the edge, whooping like children. One tries to throw them a biscuit. Misses. Badly. You remember how it felt just days ago when the storm was endless, when mutiny hung like smoke, when your boots never dried, and even your soul felt soggy. It's strange how quickly the ship's mood can shift from collapse to confidence. Historians still argue whether pirate morale was truly this elastic. Some records suggest deep camaraderie. Others depict constant backstabbing and grudges that simmered until violence boiled over. Maybe both are true. Maybe the real miracle was how often those boiling points were postponed. You head to the bow hands on the rail and feel the spray on your face not rain this time. Just motion. Just progress. Beside you, someone asks, "What do you reckon's out there?" You don't answer right away. You watch the horizon, the line where sky meets sea. Always shifting, always promising. Something worth chasing, you say. He grins. That's pirate talk if I ever heard it. The wind stiffens. The ship surges forward. You feel it in your bones now that wild, reckless hope again. That sense that somewhere out there is more than just gold, or rum, or revenge. Somewhere, there's a place where the rain ends, the stars return, and the stories you've survived become something worth telling. For now, you just let yourself ride the rhythm of the deck under your feet. You are a pirate, and the sea, once again, is yours. The stars come out like they're showing off. They don't peek or whisper. They spill across the sky, bold and bright, scattering diamonds across a velvet black sea. You tilt your head back stunned. After all those days beneath rain and gray, this feels like a gift. Like the sky finally remembered how to breathe. The deck quiets. The crew spreads out, some leaning on rails, some lying back on coiled ropes, a few simply perched wherever there's room to sit and stare upward. No shouting, no dice games. Just stillness, shared and sacred. You lie down too, your back against the warm wood, the rhythm of the waves beneath you, like a slow heartbeat. Your arms are folded behind your head, your hat tipped back, and your eyes wide open. There's Orion, and the Pleiades, and the crooked line someone swears is the drunk goat. You don't correct them. Here's your historical fact. Pirates were guided by the stars as much as by charts. Celestial navigation was essential. Constellations, lunar phases, and the North Star all played key roles in steering ships. On clear nights like this, you could almost forget how lost you'd once been. The captain strolls past, slowly, not saying a word. He just tips his hat at each crew member. They nod back. That's all it takes tonight. You breathe in the salt air, cleaner now, fresher tinged with the scent of the open ocean and a new current beneath the keel. You can almost taste distance, like the ship's already halfway to her next story. A soft strumming begins. Someone's found the half-broken lute again, and this time the tune is gentle, barely there, more suggestion than song. A few pirates hum. You hum too, without realizing. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirate crews believed that if you sang under starlight, your voice would reach home, no matter how far, no matter how long. The sky, they said, could carry secrets better than any bottle. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and behind your eyelids the memories rise. Rain endless and cold, laughter echoing off beams, a stew that never forgave you, a vote that could have broken everything, and then that moment, dry feet on sand, real food, real fire, a sky that didn't threaten. And now this. Historians still argue whether pirates believed in fate. Some say they were fatalists resigned to a short life and a loud death. Others believe they chased freedom because they believed in choice. But maybe it doesn't matter. What's real is this pirates lived, fully, wildly, stubbornly, and every moment was their own. The song fades, the stars remain, you sigh long, deep content. The sea rolls on, the ship creaks like an old friend whispering a bedtime tale. You feel your limbs grow heavy, your mind soften, your breath steady. Tomorrow there will be sails to hoist, maybe a storm, maybe a prize, maybe just another long day of endless blue. But tonight you sleep under stars, and you are free. And now the rhythm slows. The waves hush themselves into smaller whispers, as if the ocean's rocking you gently to sleep. Above, the sky stays wide and calm stars blinking like soft candles in a chapel made of wind. Your body, warm and worn, melts into the timbers beneath you. The creak of the ship, once sharp, now lulls. The sails, stretched tight with wind just hours ago, now flap slowly like sighs echoing in a dream. You shift slightly, feeling the last of the day's aches loosen, float, and drift away. The voices around you, your crew, your strange, soggy family have faded into murmurs, a kind of collective breath. No arguments, no chores, no worries about weather or rations or mutiny. Just this moment suspended in sea and stars. Somewhere behind your closed eyelids, you still see the land you left. The fire, the hammock, the cracked coconut shared with a smile, and ahead, only mystery, only open sea. But right here, right now, there is only peace. So let your breathing slow. Let the motion cradle you. Let go of the fog and the fear and the rain that once poured through your bones. You've earned this rest, every hour of it, and if by morning the horizon brings new trouble, well, you're a pirate. You'll handle it. But for now, let the ship rock you. Let the stars hold you and sleep.